Adon, the gods' damned playground, where monsters continuously spawn, forcing people into endless grinding. He awoke on the Drea continent after having perished once, his face covered in blood, yet his fighting spirit remained sky-high. He understood nothing, only knowing that he was surrounded by unlucky individuals dragged into this abyss, just like himself. Without hesitation, he formed a team with the other players, wielding 2 swords, ready to fight to the death against anything that stood in their way. In this hell on earth where old age does not exist, he had to face a gigantic monster roaring madly. The battle for survival continued endlessly, and without end. He charged in, slashing and hacking at breakneck speed. For over 100 grueling years, standing on the brink of life and death, he continuously delivered finishing blows to the monsters blocking his path. To reclaim the freedom that had been stolen, he wore a proud and defiant smile amidst the blood-soaked battlefield. His gaze was razor-sharp, as he poured all his strength and hatred into the final, decisive blow. He swung his sword, creating a massive surge of green energy, directly declaring war on the one behind it all. The destructive slash aimed directly at the one who had created this hell just for his own amusement. His target was the god of Adon. He charged forward with his blood-soaked blade, determined to pierce that bastard to death. The god of Adon revealed his true form as a gigantic purple skeleton, with glowing red eyes filled with murderous intent and disdain. He stood with his back turned, incredibly cool, his sword plunged into the ground, exuding an overwhelming pressure that crushed everything around him. He growled out "Raise dead," his eyes glowing with soul-summoning magic, signaling that the monster's playtime was over. A green magic circle appeared beneath his feet. He stood proudly, summoning his legion amidst the enemy's encirclement. A powerful surge of green energy swept through, flinging the massive monsters away like puppets with severed strings. He once thought just a little more effort would finish it, his hand commanding the skeletal minions as they charged forward to sweep the battlefield. His undead army charged in, tearing and crushing the green-skinned monsters mercilessly. A fierce explosion of green energy erupted from his minions, blowing away everything in sight. The afterglow of the green energy explosion gradually faded into nothingness with wind-rending shrieks. Rune stood proudly amidst the magical remnants, his razor-sharp gaze fixed on the sky, full of defiance. He walked alone on the path of death, where all other players had long since perished. His resolute back advanced directly towards the core of crimson energy swirling in midair. Rune wore a crazed smile. Sweat drenched him, but his fighting spirit still burned fiercely. The souls of his old comrades appeared in his mind, calling out the name Demon King, Rune, with fervent and sorrowful pleas. They appeared more vividly, begging him to free them all from this hell on earth. Rune continued walking with the burden of their dying wishes echoing in his ears, demanding freedom. He looked up at the descending enemy, determined that killing that bastard would end everything. The god of Adon revealed himself as an arrogant blonde man, proclaiming himself the overseer of this world. His pupils constricted upon hearing the condescending and scrutinizing voice of the fake deity. The god smirked, calling out his true name, Rune Sermon, with a morbid delight. Memories flooded back of when he was a fallen noble, tortured brutally to death by the madman Patton, then thrown into Adon. Rune let out a piercing scream, his green, fiery eyes cutting short the agonizing flood of memories. The god of Adon hovered in golden armor, praising him for maxing out all 3 systems in a mere 100 years. Rune swung his sword and charged, roaring about being trapped and toyed with like an animal in this endless battlefield. He swung his sword powerfully, but the god merely used one finger to create a golden shield, blocking the attack. The god sneered, praising his genuine power while effortlessly parrying the blow. He gathered energy at his fingertip, declaring he wanted to play with this little rat a bit longer. A terrifying explosion descended from the god's fingertip, blowing away the ground where Rune had just stood. Rune was flung away by the golden energy, his body shattered before the overwhelming power of the divine. The overseer bared his teeth in a savage grin, calling out his praised true name with a morbid delight. Rune's eyes welled up with tears, his life's light slowly fading at the question of his final wish. A gigantic sword of light pinned him to the ground, ending all weak attempts at resistance from the defeated. The god reached his glowing hand towards the corpse, declaring the wish had been granted in the most ironic way. The memory shifted to a gloomy castle standing tall under the chilling, eerie blue moonlight. Stone steps led deep into a dark dungeon, where only flickering torchlight and cold shackles existed. Desperate screams echoed from behind the prison bars, sending shivers down anyone's spine. Young Rune was spitting blood, his face disfigured by the relentless, brutal torture. He was bound tightly, kneeling before a basin of glowing red coals, his entire body devoid of any uninjured spot. Patton grabbed his hair and yanked it back, mocking the so-called innate talent of the noble lineage. He forcefully pushed Ryun's head down, his bloodshot eyes gleefully watching his prey writhe in agony. He smirked sinisterly, pressing his face close to the victim to whisper about the cruel curse of fate. The red-hot iron rod pressed directly against his flesh, creating a gruesome, sizzling sound and the stench of burning flesh. Ryun threw his head back and let out a choked scream, fresh blood gushing out and drenching his scarred, bare chest. The torturer leaned close to his ear, sarcastically and contemptuously praising the resilience of this wretched life. Ryun weakly begged for release, while his tormentor merely turned back with a feigned look of curiosity. His bloodshot, tear-filled eyes widened as he struggled to utter fragmented words in despair. Patton laughed cruelly, threatening to cut out his tongue if he didn't speak more clearly for him to hear. The mad noble showed boredom and disappointment that this toy, bearing the Sermon bloodline, broke faster than expected. Patton leaned against the prison bars, sarcastically remarking that today marked a significant 3-year anniversary for his prey. He pressed his deranged face against the bars, recounting the heartbreaking pain of how Lord Sons had destroyed the Sermon family. Ryun screamed in extreme agony as his body hung upside down in chains, every muscle straining as if to tear from his bones. The cold moonlight streamed through the tall window of the dungeon, an indifferent witness to the endless time passing in this earthly hell. He collapsed onto the cold stone floor, fresh blood gushing from his shattered chest, forming a large pool around his ravaged body. Ryun was stunned, wondering if this earthly hell had truly lasted for 3 long years. Memories of the glorious Sermon family, with their proud crest fluttering, suddenly resurfaced, a stark contrast to his miserable reality. The Dark Lands were renowned as a cradle of death, where bloodthirsty monsters constantly spawned to sow terror. Ferocious green-skinned monsters with fiery eyes and sharp fangs always lay in wait, ready to tear apart any living creature in their path. The Sermon family was once the strongest bulwark on the front lines, using blood and steel to halt all monster invasions into the Drea continent. Among the 5 powerful noble families, Sermon was always hailed as the mightiest and greatest, possessing overwhelming military strength. However, the mysterious and sudden disappearance of his father and brothers caused that illustrious lineage to plummet uncontrollably and collapse. The Patton family, with their insidious ambition, did not miss that golden opportunity to trample upon the remaining vestiges of the Sermon house. The true goal those bastards aimed for was to seize the divine dragon bloodline, passed down through generations in his family. Those bearing the direct bloodline were all born geniuses, capable of becoming 7th Circle Archmages at 10 or Sword Saints at 15. But Ryun was a miserable failure, a painful exception, swallowed by darkness instead of the family's genius aura. The curse of Demon King Arkan, appearing once every few centuries, had bound his fate in dark chains since he was a child. Because of that damned curse, he was stripped of all abilities, becoming a cripple unable to possess even the most basic magic or sword skills. Ryun gritted his teeth in utter resentment. If not for that cursed spell, he would have had the power to resist his fate. If he had power, he wouldn't have been trampled underfoot by the Patton family and turned into a cheap toy for them to torment at will. Dark memories flooded back. Ryun looked at the sewer rats in the dungeon with his back covered in scars, feeling that even regret was too troublesome. A rat with fiery eyes, as if heralding death's approach, made him clearly feel that today was the end of his life. His ravaged body was torn apart by energy currents, blood gushing profusely, yet it was the release he had long awaited. Blood and tears mingled on his bruised face as he whispered his last words in his dying throes. Darkness enveloped his fading vision. He cried not out of fear, but out of relief that he could finally rest in eternal peace. Back on the battlefield, a colossal dark entity with a blazing purple aura appeared, as if to swallow the entire world. Ryun stood defiantly on the corpse of the monster he had just slain, his cloak fluttering amidst the bloody battlefield, asserting his position as the strong. His emerald eyes were razor-sharp, a skull emblem pinned to his chest, exuding the aura of one who had walked through hell. Facing the colossal dragon head and the spectral entity behind it, Ryun showed no hesitation, merely silently observing his prey. He flashed an arrogant, challenging smile, his left eye blazing with a furious magical light, signaling the start of the slaughter. Ryun shot forth like an arrow tearing through the wind, leaving a long green streak from his eyes, ready to fight to the death against anyone in his way. Battle memories overlapped. He was like a whirlwind of death, sweeping away the armored soldiers with the most brutal sword strikes. Before him now was the Overseer, hovering in mid-air with a dazzling golden aura, the one who proclaimed himself Lord of this world. The golden-haired god stroked his chin with an arrogant expression and a sneering smile, looking at Ryun like an ant struggling to break free. Regardless of who his divine opponent was, Rune gripped his sword tightly and charged forward with sky-high killing intent, determined to sever his head. The arrogant god simply raised his hand and flicked it lightly, accumulating a terrifying stream of golden energy at his fingertip. A horrifying explosion struck the ground, forming a colossal crater, its overwhelming power instantly blowing away everything around it. From within the swirling dust, the overseer slowly descended with golden energy wings, looking down at his victim flattened on the ground. He extended his glowing hand forward as if bestowing a favor, declaring he would grant his opponent's wish for death. Rune lay on the ground, gasping for breath, drenched in sweat, his eyes wide with astonishment at the absolute overwhelming power of the final boss. The maid's shrill cry woke the one lying dazed on the bed. Rune shot up, his face drenched in sweat, gasping for breath as if he had just escaped death's door. He gripped the girl's shoulders tightly, stammering her name in utter confusion. Colin, the maid, turned deathly pale, hastily confirming her identity as his nanny at the young master's agitation. The magnificent sermon manor appeared under the dazzling sunlight, making him disbelieve his own eyes. He frantically demanded a mirror immediately to verify his identity. Reflected in the mirror was the youthful face of a boy, completely unlike the old warrior. He pressed her for the current date, which only made Colin more panicked and confused. The year 1892 struck his mind forcefully, like a 1,000-pound sledgehammer. He froze, swallowing hard as he realized he had returned to the time when he was 12 years old. Horrific memories of the fiery catastrophe of destruction suddenly flooded his eyes. He recalled the sight of the great Sermon family engulfed in a sea of crimson flames. The vile face of his enemy Patton appeared, sneering amidst the ashes of his declining family. The overseer's promise to grant a wish echoed in his mind like a destiny. Ryun's eyes blazed with a glimmer of hope mixed with doubt about whether he had truly been reborn. Authoritative footsteps resounded on the floor, interrupting his chaotic thoughts. An old man with an imposing aura entered the room with a stern expression, making the atmosphere heavy. Ryun's pupils constricted sharply as he recognized the person who had just appeared before him. It was Alejandro, the legendary and authoritative knight captain of the Sermon family. The old man casually declared, allowing him to skip training. Thinking he was faking illness as usual, Ryun brushed aside the maid Colin's excessive worry with a firm denial. Captain Alejandro narrowed his eyes in suspicion, unable to believe his ears at the boy's strangely resolute attitude. Ryun flashed an arrogant, confident smile, and declared that he was perfectly fine with this body. Sitting on the bed, he retorted to the old man, asking what the hell today's training was, with a face full of interest. Alejandro froze for a few seconds, not understanding why this weakling boy would refuse such a golden opportunity to skip training. The old man stared at the boy's back, wondering if this was truly the useless young master he usually knew. Ryun clenched his fist, making a cracking sound, feeling the surging power of his will and reaffirming his determination. Though still doubtful about Ryun's true identity, Alejandro also began to feel that something interesting was about to happen. Ignoring the troublesome matter of his rebirth, Ryun picked up the wooden sword and demanded to skip the walking exercises to go hunt monsters right away for some action. His eyes blazed with fighting spirit, seeing this as a golden opportunity to rectify all the mistakes of his bloody past. Colin frantically screamed to stop him, while Alejandro reminded him that he used to faint repeatedly, just from seeing a goblin. Ryun swung the wooden sword through the air, admitting that this weak body was indeed useless until yesterday. He closed his eyes to feel the internal changes, ignoring all the noisy chatter around him. Ryun's eyes snapped open, sharp and keen. He had realized the distinct difference in himself now. A series of crimson system panels appeared, warning that Arcan's curse was activating, causing his fear of monsters to surge. The Demon King's gigantic skull appeared, engulfing him, amplifying his fear to the extreme to crush his spirit. Alejandro let out a long sigh, disappointed, thinking that the boy was about to have another fit of terror as usual. The old man waved his hand, ordering a halt, believing that today's training was too much for this pampered young master. Ryun stomped his foot hard on the floor, making a thud, glaring, refusing the order, and asserting that this was still not enough. He charged straight at the miserably screaming goblin, swinging his wooden sword without hesitation to break through his fear. Ryun flinched violently. Cold sweat broke out as the instinct of fear in this weak body surged. He slammed to a halt, his heels scraping hard against the ground, creating a harsh sound to regain his balance. Ryun reassured himself that his opponent was just a measly goblin, and not his weak past self. His eyes blazed with determination. Compared to the horror from that final boss, this curse was merely child's play. The image of the screaming goblin overlapped with the arrogant face of that fake deity in his memory. The golden, blazing shadow of the overseer reappeared, reminding him of a despair 1,000 times greater. Ryun roared, dispelling his fear, swinging the wooden sword with all his might and killing intent. The blow struck the monster's head forcefully, making it cough up blood, the satisfying sound of impact ringing in his ears. Alejandro and Colin's jaws dropped, their eyes wide with shock as they witnessed this unbelievable sight. The system panel announced that he had overcome the curse by experiencing an even more terrifying fear. The goblin now trembled beneath the wooden sword's blade, as Arkan's curse level immediately plummeted to rock bottom. A notification appeared, confirming he was completely immune to monster fear. Rune stood proudly before the knight captain and coldly demanded a real sword. Colin asked worriedly, but Alejandro had begun to look at the young master with completely different eyes. He gave a half-smile full of arrogance, his eyes flashing with a deadly blue light, full of confidence. Alejandro was so moved his face turned red, realizing the day he had longed for had finally arrived. In his eyes, the young master had truly become a man, while the goblin awaited death in despair. Rune swung the real sword down, and a burst of blue killing intent erupted, tearing through the surrounding space. Fresh blood splattered as the monster's head severed from its neck with a clean, powerful slash. Alejandro declared this was the dawn of the Sermon family, as he watched Rune stand tall like a god of war. The Sermon mansion appeared magnificent under the morning sun, concealing fierce undercurrents within. Rune plunged his face into the icy water to wash away his fatigue and cool his head, which was burning with calculations. He stared intently into the mirror with sharp, cold eyes, water streaming down his youthful yet murderous face. The status window appeared, confirming the support system was effective, and he had truly overcome Arkan's curse. Rune stood silently by the window, looking out, secretly rejoicing within as he had verified this body could fully develop. A golden card appeared, announcing the experience gained after the recent light warm-up. However, he bitterly realized the experience was meager. To level up this way, he would have to grind through tens of thousands of monsters. Time was running out. The prospect of the Sermon family engulfed in flames and screams was drawing closer each day. Looking into the mirror, the bloody figure of his past life's war god appeared as a confirmation that he would surely break all limits. Rune clutched the card tightly in his hand, his eyes burning with determination that he could not miss this golden opportunity to turn the tables. 2 years had passed since his father and brothers went missing, leaving the family like a headless snake. Although they still maintained their status as a great family, vultures like Patton had begun to covet and tear them apart. He clenched his fist, feeling power surging through every muscle, fiber, and bloodstream. Rune gave a half-smile full of confidence and cunning, as he had grasped the first method to level up. If the physical force method was done, then it was time for him to test the second option, which was no less formidable. A woman with fiery red hair and a mask entered with an overwhelming aura, exuding absolute power. The important meeting took place right in the mansion's luxurious living room under the clear blue sky. Rune sat opposite the esteemed guest, listening as she mentioned he had just returned from hunting petty monsters. The woman crossed her legs elegantly, getting straight to the point, asking if he had called her to teach magic. Sena unleashed brilliant firepower around her, proving the caliber of a rare 7th Circle Archmage on the continent. Sena sneered, sarcastically reminding the young master of the harsh truth that he was completely powerless. Rune sat cross-legged with arrogance, casually admitting this trashy body once couldn't feel any mana thanks to the curse. His eyes flashed with an enchanting blue light as he boldly declared that such incompetence was merely a thing of yesterday's past. Sena flinched, her face changing color in shock at the boy's unbelievably arrogant statement. The teacup on the table rattled violently, the golden tea shimmering under the invisible pressure emanating from the conversation. A gigantic, blazing fire dragon was summoned by Sena, coiling around the living room with scorching heat. She challenged him to open his eyes and see, daring him to perceive the painting drawn entirely by invisible mana flow. Ryun's eyes flared open, glowing blue, accepting this challenge, thick with the smell of gunpowder, decisively. He stated with absolute precision that it was a magnificent red dragon reigning in the air. Sena broke out in a cold sweat, stammering, wondering if she had misheard, but the truth was undeniable before her eyes. She was utterly bewildered, unable to understand how the good-for-nothing from yesterday had transformed into someone with supreme mana comprehension, on par with her. The female mage wrung her hands in distress, desperately pressing him on how he had bypassed that wicked family curse. Rune called her name with an authoritative and cold tone, cutting short her escalating panic. He held out his calloused hand, explaining that even if he could sense it, this body still couldn't cultivate using the traditional family method. Sena held her breath, waiting, cold sweat streaming down her masked face as she heard his next request. Rune emphasized, with eyes burning with ambition, that mana cultivation was a mandatory step for him to escape his good-for-nothing existence. He fully understood that this request for help meant allowing another to delve into his body and guide the mana flow. Sena warned with sharp eyes and an overwhelming aura that his life would be entirely in her hands if he dared to do so. Rune merely sneered, full of defiance, not showing the slightest fear at the threat of death. He nonchalantly asked back if she intended to kill him, because now Sena was the only lifeline he could trust. Memories of his previous life flooded back, with flames soaring to the sky as his entire team was ambushed by enemies in a sea of fire. A past version of Sena appeared, battered and covered in blood, yet her aura remained radiant. Even with her mana depleted and her body shattered, she still wore a proud, contented smile amidst death. She was truly the loyal guardian who had sacrificed her life to protect him until her last breath. Returning to reality, Rune called her name with a resolute gaze, devoid of any hesitation or fear. He launched a powerful psychological attack, asserting his trust in her above anyone else, which made Sena blush furiously. Without further ado, he stripped off his outer garments, tossing them onto a chair, preparing for the bone marrow cleansing and meditation ritual. Rune knelt in a semi-naked posture, and the white markings on his body began to glow faintly. The surrounding air vibrated, signaling the official commencement of the mana channeling process. Sena stood behind him, channeling her energy and activating the Azure Earth cultivation method, reserved only for direct descendants. She was stunned, breaking into a sweat, as she watched him immediately apply the theory into practice to guide the mana flow. For Rune, this was merely a rehash of old lessons, as he had once used this method to completely grind his stats in the world of Adon. Sena gently admonished him to concentrate intensely, causing the young man to startle and break out in a cold sweat. Her hands pressed against his bare back, warning him of the sky-piercing pain to come, and forbidding him from screaming or struggling. Sena's gaze was sharp, meticulously instructing him that if he couldn't bear it, he must consider stopping immediately. The green energy current began to invade, making Rune feel a tearing pain running down his spine as if he were being ripped apart. The physical pain triggered psychological trauma, bringing back images of being chained in a blood-soaked dungeon. The twisted face of the executioner, Patton, with his savage smile, once again haunted his mind in a delirious state. Rune roared, affirming his absolute trust in Sena to dispel the fear engulfing his mind. Understanding her master's intent, Sena gritted her teeth and poured all her strength into pushing the explosive mana flow, making Ryun's eyes glow like headlights. System notifications blared loudly, signaling the curse's activation, causing Rune to scream amidst the violently exploding energy surge. Sena calmly held him tight, assessing that this struggling reaction was entirely within her initial expectations. She channeled more mana into her hands, deciding to inject maximum energy to suppress his body's resistance. A series of crimson warnings appeared, surrounding the two as the green mana surged like a torrent. Rune gritted his teeth, analyzing the situation, realizing the curse was trying to purge the foreign mana Sena was transmitting. The Archmage began to break out in a cold sweat, realizing that even her 7th circle mana was not potent enough to suppress this high-level curse. Ryun's eyes flashed with a sharp glint. He decided to apply a genuine cultivation method from the world of Adon to turn the tables. He manipulated the energy flow to circulate within his body, using a clever trick to prevent the curse from expelling the mana. Sena gasped in astonishment as she saw the previously chaotic mana suddenly obediently remain within the young master's body. Rune concentrated intensely. The system immediately changed its notification from activating to successfully resisting the curse. A series of resistance notifications continuously appeared, proving that he was gradually taking control of the situation and turning the tide. Inside his body, currents of purple and gold electricity coursed along his mana circuits, causing a burning sensation as if every fiber of his flesh were being incinerated. Rune glared with fierce determination, asserting that he would never yield to such a petty curse. Memories flooded back of him, enduring this sky-piercing pain thousands of times when he was torn apart by orcs in the past. He recalled the moment he confronted a fire dragon, proudly remembering himself as the most dominant combat-oriented player on the Adon server. The blood-soaked face and insane smile of the conqueror appeared vividly in his warlike mind. The phantom of his past self appeared behind him, affirming that his understanding of mana was unrivaled in the world. Rune tensed his body, causing the marking on his chest to glow brightly. His soul was awakening dormant supreme skills. The image of Demon King Arkan's greenish skull appeared menacingly, as if wanting to devour the soul of anyone who dared to defy him. Rune sneered, comparing this trashy curse to nothing compared to the might of the god of Adon he had once faced. The magical markings in the air emitted crisp, cracking sounds, signaling that the limits of his power had been completely broken. Rune let out a mighty roar, his entire body glowing brilliantly as he unleashed the overwhelming power that had been suppressed for so long. Sena stood rooted to the spot, drenched in sweat, as she witnessed the terrifying power emanating from the young master. After the earth-shattering explosion, Ryun's small body lost its balance and fell backward, completely depleted of stamina. He dropped to the floor with a thud, causing Sena to rush over in a panic, calling out to the young master in alarm, fearing he had suddenly died. Ryun gritted his teeth, enduring the sky-piercing pain, his consciousness fading, yet he stubbornly told himself he was fine. The blood-soaked window frame under the cold moonlight appeared, pulling him back to the darkest nightmare of his past life. A stream of thoughts emerged, affirming that his current physical pain was nothing compared to the living hell of that time. In his memory, Ryun was bound tightly in a damp dungeon, facing two terrifying executioners wearing plague doctor masks. One of them casually discussed chopping off his hand tomorrow to test his regeneration abilities, as if making small talk. That guy clicked his tongue regretfully, then suggested they just kill him to be done with it, so they could report their success to the Patton family. Suddenly, a sharp sword strike tore through the wind, interrupting the conversation of those vile quacks. Alejandro appeared like a storm, swinging his sword and sending the torturer's body flying in an instant, leaving him no time for a final word. Fresh blood gushed out, staining the scene red, while the remaining accomplice could only stammer, too shocked by the intruder's speed. Ryun lay sprawled on the ground, his eyes hazy with tears and blood, vaguely watching the chaotic scene as he heard the enemy's desperate screams. He gazed blankly at the moonlit forest scenery through a gap, not understanding how he had managed to escape outside. A warm, deep voice anxiously asked if he was awake, pulling him back to reality. Alejandro revealed himself with a face covered in blood and a scar across his eye, his eyes radiating extreme sorrow for his young master. The old knight captain bent down, his voice choked with an apology for arriving too late to salvage the situation. Ryun burst into tears, unable to believe his eyes, as he saw Alejandro had risked his life to save him from hell. Ryun lay sobbing uncontrollably, tears streaming down his tear-stained face as if he had just experienced a terrifying nightmare. He lay flat on the sickbed in striped pajamas, looking up at the ceiling with eyes swollen from emotion. Ryun raised a hand to wipe away his tears, telling himself he should be celebrating his successful cultivation instead of being so tearful. Bloody memories of Sinus and Alejandro's deaths haunted him, but he swore he would not let that tragedy repeat. He clenched his fists with determination, confidently asserting that he was now fully capable of changing destiny. Ryun looked at his hand, glowing with energy, reminding himself to keep this formidable cultivation method an absolute secret. The image of the cunning Patton appeared in his mind as a warning about the most dangerous enemy he needed to guard against. Ryun resolved to make a bold move, to accelerate the downfall of the Sermon family itself, to shatter the status quo. The Sermon family mansion appeared majestic under the dazzling sunlight, where earth-shattering changes were about to unfold. Ryun scratched his head and gave a wry smile, creating a smokescreen as he casually announced that he had miserably failed in mana cultivation. Sena and Alejandro froze for 5 seconds, their faces clearly showing shock and disbelief. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy, like a funeral. Ryun sat with his face turned away, feigning disappointment, making the other two extremely anxious. His eyes, sharp and cold, glanced backward, silently apologizing for having to play the role of a failure to conceal the shocking truth. Ryun struggled with his thoughts, wondering if blurting out the truth would help them or just make everything more complicated. He clutched the bedsheets, filled with worry, knowing full well that if he told his absurd reincarnation story, no one would believe him. Ryun turned back with a practiced smile, feigning innocence as he explained that he had tried his best for everyone's expectations. He spread his hands, bluffing that he couldn't feel any mana at all, challenging Sena to check for herself. Sena looked at the young master with eyes full of doubt, deciding not to listen to his explanation but to directly verify it herself. She firmly grasped Ryun's hand and activated her mana detection skill. A crimson aura flared up, enveloping both of them. Sena exclaimed in horror upon discovering the truth, while Ryun wore a meaningful and confident smile. Sena stood rooted to the spot, her face pale as she watched the green mana stream vanish into nothingness, as if it had never existed. She was utterly bewildered, firmly asserting to herself that just yesterday, she had clearly felt a surging energy within the boy. Ryun staggered away with a feigned weakness, leaving Sena behind, still reeling in shock, while Alejandro, hiding nearby, had heard the entire conversation. Alejandro stood, leaning against the wall, cold sweat pouring down him as he witnessed a scene he had never wished for. The old man clenched his fists, trying to suppress his disappointment, reassuring himself that as long as the young master diligently practiced swordsmanship, there was still hope for redemption. Ryun gave a pained, calculating smile, making up a story that his body was so overloaded that even eating became torture, let alone using mana. Upon hearing this, Alejandro's old heart shattered into pieces. The glimmer of hope that had just ignited was mercilessly extinguished. The dignified knight captain now stood frozen, like a statue, his spirit crushed by the grim news he had just received. Time flew by quickly. The last golden autumn leaves fell, signaling a bleak season enveloping the mansion. 2 months later, white snow had covered the Sermon Castle, bringing bone-chilling cold and an eerie silence. Colin stepped out of the young master's room, gently closing the door with a face heavy with worry. The maid sadly realized that today, Rune continued to seclude himself in his room, cutting off all contact with the outside world. Colin looked up at the lady's portrait, feeling pained to see that only she was shouldering the entire declining family. The butler, with a cold expression, stopped her to inquire, but knew full well the answer was that the young master was still holed up in his room. He uttered sarcastically that ever since the monster-slaying incident 3 months ago, Rune now ignored even the knight captain's words. This man cruelly concluded that sudden change was merely a brief flash of brilliance, a short dream that quickly faded. Colin couldn't control her emotions, and shouted back angrily to defend her young master's honor. She asserted with resolute eyes that on that day, Rune had truly tried his best to shoulder the fate of the Sermon family. But the world's wagging tongues spared no one. Throughout the kingdom, people began to brand him with the title, Sermon's Delinquent. The butler delivered a stinging final remark to Colin, saying that the higher the expectation, the greater the disappointment, especially for a family on the verge of collapse. The stone-faced butler announced he would leave this crumbling family after the month ended, as all the staff had already resigned. He turned to ask Colin what she planned to do, causing the poor maid to break out in a cold sweat from the immense pressure on her shoulders. Rune placed his knife and fork down with a clatter, cutting through the gloomy atmosphere with the demeanor of a superior. He wiped his mouth, then complained about the declining quality of the meal, implying the family's finances were critically depleted. But immediately after, his eyes gleamed with a wicked smile, as everything was unfolding exactly according to the script he had prepared. If he were the inexperienced fool he once was, he would have emptied his pockets trying to save this sinking family. But now he was a cunning old fox with battle experience in Adon, knowing how to patiently bide his time to deliver the finishing blow. The downfall began when the family head went missing, dragging an entire power structure into a freefall. His eldest brother and the mages who went searching also never returned, causing the core personnel to be completely wiped out. The training ground, once bustling with the cheers of elite warriors, was now just a faded memory. Currently, only a few greenhorn recruits with meager skills remained, along with bored servants working like zombies. Vassals and allies, sensing trouble, turned tail and fled, leaving behind piles of desolate weapons in the cold snow. Those who once sought to ally themselves with the Sermon family, seeing this scene of desolation, also hastily retreated to preserve their forces. Thanks to this, everything became strangely quiet, allowing Rune to lounge on his bed, enjoying his laziness. He could comfortably lock himself in his room and play the role of a useless good-for-nothing without anyone bothering him. However, lying around eventually grew tiresome, and he realized the family's rate of decline was slower than a saboteur's calculations. They say a lean camel is better than a fat horse, but he was determined to accelerate this collapse starting tomorrow. While he was deep in thought, plotting his schemes, Colin kicked the door open and burst in with a bang, radiating the fierce aura of someone going to war. Her eyes shining like headlights, she grinned and shouted that it was time to train with the knight captain, sending shivers down his spine. Before Rune could even utter his usual excuse to skip training, Colin flung off his blanket, leaving him dumbfounded by the maid's sheer audacity. Tired of reasoning, Colin directly used force to lift Rune up in a princess carry, leaving him completely shocked. Seeing Colin's murderous expression, determined to save her young master, Rune broke out in a cold sweat, knowing there was no escape. In the maid's mind at that moment were only images of young Rune and her oath of absolute loyalty to this crumbling family. And so, Rune was carried straight out the door by Colin, towards the blinding light of the training ground, like a sacrificial offering. The grand scene of the Sermon family's training ground appeared, where the familiar play of the useless young master was about to unfold. Alejandro shouted himself hoarse because Rune held his sword like a mere stick, completely wrong in basic technique. The old man patiently explained about sensing mana while swinging the sword, trying to drill it into the kid's head, unaware that he was a master of this very thing. On the surface, Rune looked clueless, but inwardly, he smirked, admiring the old master's resilience and dedication. In reality, at night, when everyone was fast asleep, Rune secretly did one-finger handstands to frantically grind for physical strength. He activated the renowned body control skill of Adon's assassins, allowing him to deceive everyone about his true condition. Although his current body was as weak as spoiled noodles, he still forced himself to overclock, allowing a stream of green mana to envelop his entire body. The system's ding-ding sound rang out, signaling a surge in experience points and physical strength after his intense efforts in the dark. His strength also gained 1 point, and Rune smirked triumphantly, but then suddenly realized he was exposing a flaw in broad daylight. He hastily feigned a stomachache to go to the toilet, quickly escaping Alejandro's sight before his abnormality was discovered. Rune hid in a secluded corner, a ghostly green aura surging from his body like a nuclear reactor. He frowned, realizing the skill was still unstable. Any strenuous movement caused the aura to leak out uncontrollably. Rune shouted the familiar command to summon his status window and check the fruits of his long-term grinding. The stat window appeared with level 3 and lush green stats, and he grinned widely because his 3-month plan had finally borne fruit. His next goal was to maximize his stats to 20, then change classes to Ghost, Necromancer, and Assassin to dominate this server once more. Just as he returned to the training ground, he saw Alejandro conversing with a cunning-faced man named Trunohilda, the family's chief steward. Trunohilda handed Rune an important scroll, announcing that the fated moment had arrived and they had to transfer this immediately. Rune opened the scroll and read it, his eyes turning sharp and cold as he realized the contents perfectly matched what he had anticipated. It was an invitation to the birthday party of the second prince of the Daron kingdom, Kyle Daron, to be held in December 1892. He curled his lips into a calculating smile, clenching his fist because the final piece of his plan to collapse the Sermon family had officially fallen into place. The scene shifted to the journey to the capital, and Rune yawned repeatedly from exhaustion after the long carriage ride under the scorching sun. Trunohilda, seeing this, inquired, but Rune merely complained with an exasperated expression about being tormented by the maid Colin all night long. He shuddered, recalling the scene of Colin, her eyes shining like headlights, forcing him to try on tons of flamboyant clothes to prepare for this grand debut. Trunohilda began to explain why this important journey involved only the two of them, with the absence of the family's prominent figures. The chief steward stated that a sudden monster outbreak had occurred at a perfectly precise timing, forcing the main forces to remain. Alejandro had to lead the cavalry to the border to carry out the mission of stopping the monsters, protecting the territory in accordance with the family's age-old responsibility. As for Sena, she was unfortunately summoned urgently back to the main house by her mother, so she couldn't accompany the young master on this trip. Trunohilda reassured them that even with only a 12-year-old boy representing them, the family's illustrious reputation remained, so there was no need to worry. He confidently asserted that in this kingdom, no one would be audacious enough to harm a single hair on a direct descendant of the Sermon family. Upon hearing this, Rune sneered inwardly, fully aware that such a reputation only held true during the Golden Age, but was now utterly ruined. He pondered the family's pathetic decline, recalling how in the past, merely sending a retainer would suffice, but now the master himself had to go in person. Rune leaned back in his chair with an innocent expression, secretly thinking that he was the one pulling the strings to create this random situation so he could go alone. From afar, the magnificent city of Darbon, the capital of the Daron kingdom, stood majestically under the dazzling sunlight. The luxurious carriage carrying Rune slowly rolled through the bustling city gates, beginning its infiltration into the den of power. As soon as the carriage stopped before the grand hall, 2 rows of servants and guards lined up neatly, bowing in a truly solemn reception. Rune stepped out of the carriage with an arrogant demeanor, directly facing Second Prince Kyle Daron, who stood waiting with an unreadable expression. Second Prince Kyle Daron spread his arms wide in welcome with a practiced smile, uttering flowery words about the Sermon family's dragon. Kyle Daron stood there with the haughty air of a superior, his sharp gaze assessing the newly arrived guest. Trunohilda bowed subserviently, while Rune stood behind him with a cold, indifferent expression, as if unconcerned with worldly affairs. Rune muttered about the so-called hospitality, his eyes darkening with calculation. He glanced around, clearly feeling every scrutinizing gaze from the palace gates directed at him. The city's populace watched the luxurious carriage with sympathetic eyes for the family on the verge of collapse. The crowd began to whisper and point, labeling Rune as a useless good-for-nothing, just as the malicious rumors claimed. Rune walked amidst the wave of criticism, clearly sensing the contempt and ridicule from those lurking in the shadows. A cunning smirk appeared on Rune's face. He was pleased that everything was unfolding exactly according to his script. Rune's expression changed in a flash. He scratched his head, gave an awkward smile, and pretended to stammer a greeting like a country bumpkin visiting the city. Trunohilda covered his face in shame, not daring to look at anyone, utterly humiliated by his young master's foolish performance. The nobles seized the opportunity to laugh gleefully, exchanging mocking glances at the Sermon family heir's incompetence. Beneath that innocent facade was a grinning demon, and he wondered if he should continue playing this clownish role a little longer. Rune stood on the balcony, looking down at the courtyard, his cold voice cutting through someone else's thoughts. The escort captain was stuffing pastries into his mouth, recalling that the entire entourage had arrived at the palace a week early. He reminisced about Rune standing stiff as a wooden statue in the middle of the banquet hall, too timid to even open his mouth to greet anyone. The captain ate resentfully, annoyed that Rune had holed himself up in his room ever since their arrival, refusing to show his face outside. He wailed miserably, lamenting that 5 days had passed without him getting a taste of the vibrant festival atmosphere outside. His mind was filled only with fantasies of delicious food, fine wine, and beautiful women that he was unjustly missing out on. The door burst open, and Rune stepped out in a dashing new outfit, boldly declaring that today he would officially join the festivities. The escort soldiers huddled together, listening as the captain relayed the young master's eccentric command. They high-fived in celebration, thrilled to finally let loose after days of being confined like prisoners under house arrest. It turned out, Rune had instructed Chief Steward Rune to keep his party attendance a secret until the last minute. The soldiers couldn't care less about any schemes. They were simply overjoyed to attend the royal party. Rune kicked open the door and stepped out in his dashing attire, rallying his companions to set off with fervent enthusiasm. He revealed that he hadn't been hiding in his room, sleeping in for the past few days, but rather intensely training his physique, even doing handstands. Rune stood admiring the view, admitting that attending the party wasn't merely to appease his subordinates. His eyes sharpened like razors as he thought of his true, far grander purpose. A luxurious carriage sped through the night, carrying a formidable figure about to stir up the party. That person was none other than Sons Patton, the madman with white hair and an arrogant smile, licking his lips in anticipation of his prey. Rune immediately sensed the familiar killing intent, his eyes hardening at the mention of Sons Patton's name. The magnificent castle glowed brightly under the crimson sunset, as if heralding a night full of upheaval. The entire banquet hall buzzed with excitement as the announcer boomed the powerful name of Sons Patton. The grand doors slowly opened, accompanied by a sinister cackle echoing from the darkness. Sons Patton entered with a condescending air, clad in a striking crimson outfit and a prominent blue cloak. He glanced around the banquet hall with a disdainful look, as if observing a swarm of ants beneath his feet. Hilda stood in a corner, sweat pouring down him like a river at the sight of the formidable figure's appearance. Sons Patton approached, greeting him with a sarcastic tone that made the old chief steward's heart nearly stop. He mentioned Second Prince Kyle, with a tone full of innuendo, feigning regret that the play was about to end. Sons Patton flashed a twisted, morbid smile, directly asking Rune where the renowned Rune was hiding. Hilda broke out in a cold sweat, his face drained of color as the sharp gaze of the malevolent figure pinned him down. Sons Patton continued to torment the old steward mentally, with explosive questions about the family's reputation. He sneered, mentioning the so-called downfall of the Sermon family, and the story of the good-for-nothing Rune with a contemptuous tone. Patton listed Rune's debaucherous exploits from the age of 7 to publicly disgrace him before everyone. Meanwhile, everyone praised Sons Patton as a magical genius who reached the 5th circle at just 15, a stark contrast to that good-for-nothing. Patton sarcastically bellowed, introducing the arrival of the Dragon of Drea, young Master Rune's Sermon, intending to make him a laughingstock. The door burst open with a dazzling light effect, and Rune stepped out with an unparalleled aura that blinded everyone. Sons Patton froze for 5 seconds, clutching his lapel, unable to believe his eyes at the regal presence of his opponent. Rune appeared impeccably dressed and clean, completely unlike the rumors of a drunken addict. Hilda gaped in astonishment, unable to comprehend how the young master, who had been holed up in his room, had undergone such a spectacular transformation. His flowing hair and luxurious attire made Rune sparkle like a youth idol amidst the crowd. Rune's confident smirk immediately shattered all false rumors about him being a good-for-nothing. The nobles quickly changed their tune, praising the undeniable regal aura of the Sermon bloodline, while the ladies blushed profusely. Sons Patton gnashed his teeth, seeing his own spotlight completely stolen by that brat right on his home turf. He trembled violently with fury, refusing to accept that the Sermon name had once again stolen his spotlight. Rune calmly walked up to his enemy with the demeanor of a true superior, utterly fearless. He calmly spoke, confirming Sons Patton's identity, which startled him greatly. Rune placed a hand on his chest, smiling as he mentioned, having heard many stories from his brother, Lars. The name Lars, once uttered, caused Rune, Hilda, and the crowd to buzz with endless whispers of surprise. Rune concluded with a backhanded compliment, stating that young Master Sons Patton was truly kind-hearted, which made Patton's eyes nearly burst with rage. Rune continued his mental torment by recalling the academy incident and the illustrious reputation of his brother Sons Patton. Sons Patton gnashed his teeth, cursing inwardly as he faced his opponent's fake, provocative smile. Rune fabricated a heroic tale of Sons Patton saving a classmate, completely contradicting the image of him extorting money from a poor male student. He continued to spin a tale about Sons Patton rescuing a harassed female student, while in reality, Patton himself was the pervert coercing the girl. Rune placed a hand on his lips, feigning contemplation of any untold exploits, making Sons Patton so furious that dark energy billowed from him. Ryun's eyes flashed with a deadly, mischievous glint as he uttered the sensitive keyword related to knees. Trunohilda broke out in a cold sweat, his face drained of color, hearing Ryun mention Lars's knee pain and Sons Patton bringing medicine. Ryun took Sons Patton's hand, playing the role of a close brother, then casually stated that he had forgotten the Knight Commander's message. He leaned close to Sons Patton's face, a suffocatingly near distance, to whisper threats beneath a veneer of friendliness. Ryun darted away like a mischievous child, leaving Trunohilda in a panic, trying to intervene against young Master Patton's murderous gaze. The smile on Ryun's lips vanished, replaced by a cruel expression and the sharp eyes of one who had just sown terror. Sons Patton stood, rooted to the spot, his eyes bloodshot from the furious rage and humiliation violently erupting within his chest. He looked up at the sky, unable to believe that he had just been openly threatened by a brat in front of a crowd. Ryun walked away proudly, secretly hoping Sons Patton's wrath would erupt even more fiercely to serve his own schemes. He flashed a devilish smile, certain that his enemy's uncontrolled anger was the crucial seed for his upcoming plan. A silent night enveloped the magnificent mansion, where horrific events were about to unfold from the wrath of the defeated. Crash! A precious vase was smashed to pieces on the floor, venting the humiliation he had just endured. Sons Patton stormed down the corridor, ceaselessly cursing the name Ryun Sermon and vowing revenge. Ryun's words about Lars echoed in his mind like a bitter reminder of a dark, hidden past. The truth was revealed in Sons Patton's memory. He hadn't dropped out, but was expelled, and Lars knew full well how he had once been forced to kneel in humiliation. The sarcastic remarks about knee pain and the bitter medicine Ryun had just sown still echoed in his enemy's ears. Patton's face twisted in agony as the humiliating memories of the past intertwined with the bitter present. He gasped for breath, sweat pouring down him like rain, his entire body trembling violently from uncontrollable rage. In his memory, Lars, with lightning swirling around him, declared that Patton had made a fatal mistake. The Patton of old could only stammer denials in fear, sweat pouring down as he faced Lars's wrath. Lars bluntly ordered the arrogant young master to kneel immediately and beg for forgiveness. Lars' eyes blazed with murderous intent, vowing to discard his family's honor to take the life of anyone who dared touch his people. Patton gnashed his teeth, his eyes welling up with tears from the utter humiliation he could not swallow. Finally, he had to kneel prostrate on the ground, enduring Lars's lightning punishment in front of that girl. Back in reality, Patton clutched his head, screaming wildly like a wounded beast wanting to rend the air. Ryun walked coldly into the night, pushing aside the image of his older brother to focus on the next step of his plan. Patton covered his face and cackled, a wild glint in his eyes, signaling a gruesome fate about to befall someone. The room door burst open, and Patton, with disheveled hair, invited his guest in, a cruel and deranged expression on his face. The door creaked open, breaking the tense atmosphere in the gloomy room. Light streamed in from the doorway, revealing the one who had just entered to be the Sermon family's chief steward, in a furtive manner. Patton glanced at the midnight visitor with glowing purple eyes, full of suspicion and danger. Trunohilda revealed himself, his old face full of schemes under the room's dim light. Cold blue moonlight enveloped the mountain, witnessing the dark schemes beginning to unfold. The convoy of carriages and knights silently departed from the city gate, beginning to move according to the predetermined plan. Ryun, in a smart and elegant scholarly appearance, pushed up his glasses and flashed a triumphant smile. For the big fish Patton had perfectly taken the bait. Trunohilda began to flatter, praising the young master's spectacular ruckus at the recent party. Ryun sat with his legs crossed arrogantly, admitting that he hadn't bothered to socialize but had actively provoked conflict with the Patton family to sow discord. The old fox Trunohilda flashed a sinister smile, confessing that such a crazy act had strangely invigorated him. Ryun's eyes suddenly changed, becoming cold and sharp as a razor as he prepared to show his hand to the subordinate. He snapped his fingers lightly, activating the magic he had prepared right in front of the old chief steward. Trunohilda flinched, his face changing color as he felt a strange mana flow envelop the space with a soft hum. Ryun narrowed his eyes, his gaze full of pressure and calculation, sending a chill down the opponent's spine. The space inside the carriage was immediately completely isolated by the sound-insulating barrier Rune had just activated, trapping his prey inside. He flashed an evil smile under the crimson glow of magic, beginning to interrogate about loyalty and betrayal. Hilda broke out in a cold sweat, his heart pounding as if it would leap from his chest under the invisible pressure weighing heavily. The old man stammered back in utter confusion, as the young master cornered him with tricky questions. The carriage silently advanced under the cold moonlight, concealing the tense, suffocating battle of wits within. Ryun's eyes glowed crimson like a demon, declaring he would forgive those sins if they were committed for the benefit of the Sermon family. Hilda's face twisted in horror, the rapid thumping of his heart echoing in his ears. He was speechless, his eyes wide open, unable to utter a word, as his darkest secret was exposed. The once powerful chief steward now completely collapsed, trembling and slumping onto the carriage floor before the 12-year-old boy. Ryun growled with authority, forcing him to decide his own fate at that very moment. Hilda stared at the unfamiliar young master before him, sweat drenching his old face from fear. The escort continued to move through the night, completely unaware of the horrifying event unfolding within the commander's carriage. Ryun raised a hand to cover his face, revealing one eye full of excitement as he felt the frantic heartbeat of his prey, who had perfectly fallen into the trap. Old Truno's heart pounded as if it would burst from his chest due to utter terror. Ryun sat with his legs crossed arrogantly, exuding a blue pressure that made the surrounding air thick and heavy. The old chief steward broke out in a cold sweat, stammering back and asking the young master where that plan had originated. Ryun's eyes glowed brightly, peering into the opponent's soul with a sharp, authoritative gaze. Truno covered his face, letting out a pathetic groan like a desperate man. But then he bared his teeth in a mad grin, tears streaming down his face, yet his mouth screamed in ecstasy. Ryun smirked, his eyes cold as a razor, seeing through the old man's depravity. He rested his chin on his hand, calling Hilda's name in a calm yet threatening tone. Truno looked in horror at the boy, who was calmly smiling despite knowing death was about to knock. The old man suddenly realized that the young master's smile held no friendly or innocent meaning. It was the cold and cruel killing intent of a monster toying with its prey. Suddenly, the carriage violently shook, accompanied by a loud noise, making everything sway. The convoy stopped abruptly in the middle of the road, causing the escort soldiers to become agitated, not understanding what was happening. An escort soldier was startled in horror as a chill ran down his spine. Truno stared wide-eyed outside, mumbling about poison in utter astonishment. A streak of dark purple magic tore through the air with a deafening shriek, crashing into the barrier. The horses neighed in panic, and soldiers screamed, alerting of an enemy attack. Thousands of magic-infused arrows rained down like deadly showers, enveloping the entire convoy. Shouts warning of mana-infused arrows echoed desperately amidst the chaos. The mages hastily activated golden barriers to defend against the blow in a perilous situation. An escort soldier roared in fury, swinging his sword to deflect the magical arrows raining down. A golden barrier glowed brightly, enveloping the carriage, blocking all long-range attacks, while the soldiers held their ground outside. The bearded captain yelled loudly, forbidding anyone from approaching the carriage and threatening to decapitate even allies to protect the VIP. The carriage door burst open, but it was empty inside, making the nearby soldier stammer in horror, unable to speak. A shrill scream rang out, signaling that the young master had vanished, causing the entire defensive formation to break in panic. Under the cold moonlight, the escort soldiers stared at each other in confusion, not understanding when their protected target had disappeared. A cloaked figure riding a black horse charged out from the magical mist with dangerously glowing eyes. Beneath the hood was an old face, panting heavily, as if utterly exhausted after the kidnapping. Ryun suddenly materialized right behind the kidnapper, delivering a swift neck chop to steal the horse and escape. A series of system notifications about detrimental statuses like blindness and physical weakening appeared as he somersaulted in the air. Sweat poured down. Ryun gritted his teeth, enduring the pain, and realized the enemy had used too much control magic on him. He panted while analyzing the situation, certain that the escort soldiers were in utter chaos, having lost track of their master. Ryun spurred his horse into the night, recalling that in his previous life, this kidnapping was the beginning of his family's financial collapse. But with his current capabilities, he was confident he was no longer a useless boy to be tossed about by fate. He clenched his fist with determination, intending to use this very kidnapping to accelerate his own plans. An image appeared in his mind of Chief Steward Truno, sweating profusely upon realizing the act of feigned decline. Ryun fully understood that if he now showed his talent and revived the family, it would only invite trouble from other powers. Other noble families, like vultures, would immediately ally to crush Sermon if they saw a rising threat. That's why he deliberately played the role of a useless, corrupt wastrel, wearing the fierce bird crest but letting the nobles laugh at him. Ryun's eyes flashed with a demonic red light as he thought of turning the tables on those patent bastards who wanted to eradicate the Sermon lineage. Truno Hilda broke out in a cold sweat, realizing that Sun's patent had taken the bait exactly as planned. The old steward trembled at the thought of having to play the role of an informant, betraying his master. Ryun smirked arrogantly because the prey had fallen into the trap without fail. He used invisible pressure to force Truno to choose the only path to salvage the situation. This kidnapping would be the end, or the signal for the rise of the Sermon family. The system reported continuously. Ryun activated an overwhelming skill, resisting all negative effects and poisons. His eyes flashed emerald green, confirming that the first phase of the plan was perfectly completed as intended. Ryun hung upside down in his mental space, satisfied that the growth conditions had been met. All stats reached the 20 mark. The sense stat was officially unlocked after the grind. At the rendezvous point under the moonlight, a tense atmosphere enveloped the desolate ruins. Patton's blue-clad subordinates brought the unconscious Ryun forward with cold expressions. Ryun kept his eyes tightly shut, feigning death, while Truno secretly apologized for having to let the young master suffer. The soldiers dropped him onto the ground with a thud, as if the goods had been successfully exchanged. Ryun took advantage of the chaos, slightly opened his eyes, and whispered, ordering Truno to play his role perfectly according to the plan. Truno broke out in a cold sweat, forced to nod in agreement to play the role of a traitor to be forgiven. Sun's patent stepped out from the shadows, showing surprise and disdain upon seeing Truno arrive in person. He looked at the soldier holding Ryun, mockingly scoffing at Truno for daring to betray his young master. Truno gritted his teeth, trying to suppress his humiliation upon hearing the venomous insults from Sun's patent. The young master of patent proudly displayed a scroll containing intelligence obtained from the assassin family Asan. Truno hastily examined the scroll, confirming the credibility of this dangerous exchange item. The scroll bearing the black crow crest of the assassin family Asan was the guarantee of the credibility of the information being exchanged. Truno trembled, holding the intelligence scroll in his hand, sweat pouring down as Patton pointed and imposed his will. The old steward stood frozen, enduring the situation. Behind him was Ryun, feigning being bound, creating a perfect scene of betrayal. It turned out Truno's motive for betraying the young master was to exchange for information about the whereabouts of the Sermon family's missing talented elder brothers. Patton chuckled smugly, boasting that his family had used their financial power to preemptively acquire this information. The white-haired young master waved his hand, dismissing Truno as if warding off evil, mockingly calling him Sir Traitor with utter contempt. Truno dejectedly turned his back and walked away into the night, anxiously trying to salvage the situation by reminding them of the promise to return the people. Patton flashed a sinister smile, swearing he would return Ryun home safely, but his eyes reeked of deceit. The clatter of horse hooves echoed. Truno rode away from the scene, leaving his young master in the tiger's den. The soldiers intended to eliminate Truno to tie up loose ends, but Patton stopped them, believing the old man's life was already forfeit. He muttered, calculating that the Sermon family would sooner or later discover Truno was the mastermind behind this kidnapping. Patton clenched his ambitious fist, asserting that Ryun must return for his grand plan to run smoothly. He suddenly grabbed Ryun's hair and violently yanked his head back, yelling that he had to do this himself to feel satisfied. The pervert vented his anger on the hostage, complaining that he had to endure the traitor's face just to wait for this moment. The cold moonlight shone down on the silent forest, witnessing the insane monologue of the Patton family's young master. A flash of light signaled that Ryun's feigned death act had officially concluded. Ryun suddenly opened his eyes, his gaze sharp and terrifyingly clear, without any sign of being drugged. The scene shifted to the dungeon, where Patton laughed maniacally, seeing Ryun chained by his hands to the ceiling in a pathetic state. Ryun calmly raised his head and asked what he was doing, making Patton dumbfounded as he re-explained his kidnapping. Ryun launched a psychological attack, asking if he knew the consequences, while Patton sneered, recalling their confrontation in the banquet hall with a defiant look. Patton wore a sick smile, his eyes flashing with cruelty, thinking he held the upper hand in this cat-and-mouse game. He grabbed the hostage's head, leaned close to his ear, and whispered venomous words about the death of his father and brother Lars to break his opponent's spirit. Without further ado, the deranged young master delivered a devastating punch, accompanied by a sickening crunch, sending fresh blood splattering. He simultaneously yelled warnings about the absolute power of the Patton family, and delivered cruel kicks to the chained person. A brutal kick landed squarely on his face, but instead of losing consciousness, Ryun's emerald eye suddenly snapped open, filled with murderous intent. The moment he was hit, Patton continued to ramble on about the weakness of the pampered young master, completely unaware that death was already eyeing him. The madman pointed at the victim's face, cackling as he revealed that Rune himself had cheaply betrayed his master. He spread his arms wide, smugly asserting that Rune had been traded for information about his brothers, and would rot to death here, with no one to save him. Patton gripped Rune's jaw tightly, growling that this kidnapping was the foundation for the life-or-death war between their two families. In response to the physical and mental torture, Rune merely curled his lip in a sneer and muttered, disparaging the fool for talking too much. A bizarre green aura and a piercing screech began to leak from Rune's body, making the surrounding space tremble. Patton's triumphant face immediately changed color, his pupils contracting as he felt an abnormal magical pressure right before him. Rune's power erupted, his torn shirt revealing a glowing chest and the smile of a true predator, now revealed. He activated a gigantic, glowing magic circle beneath his feet, the surging sound of fluctuating energy engulfing the entire dungeon. Patton frantically covered his eyes from the blinding light, cold sweat pouring down like a stream as the situation reversed too quickly. The arrogant young master now stood frozen on the green magic formation, realizing he had fallen into his prey's trap without knowing when. Rune looked at his enemy with sharp eyes, coldly declaring that he had waited for this moment of revenge since the day he set foot back in Drea. Patton's eyes widened in horror, reflecting the deadly green light, his mouth stammering, unable to utter a word. Rune floated in midair, his feet gently gliding over the formation like a judging deity preparing to execute a death sentence. Outside the ancient tower, fierce green magical light erupted from the windows, tearing through the quiet night, signaling the start of a massacre. Patton stood rooted to the spot within the green magic circle, while Rune, still chained, completely dominated the situation with his aura. The young master frantically realized his magic was completely useless. He wailed miserably, not understanding why everything was immobilized. Patton still tried to salvage some dignity by sneering that his opponent was stalling, but Rune's hand had already begun to emit a deadly energy. Rune wore a contemptuous smile, his emerald eyes glowing brightly as he directly called his enemy an idiot for still not understanding the situation. He declared Patton talked too much, his blood-soaked face exuding the cruelty and exhilaration of a true hunter. A magic seal tightened around Patton's neck, making his eyes roll back and him emit a painful gasp as he choked. The noble struggled, trying to bring his hands to his neck, but his mouth was tightly sealed, only able to utter a few meaningless gurgles. Patton clutched his throat in despair, sweat pouring down like a shower as he realized his voice had completely vanished. Rune coldly explained about the Silent Circle, the ultimate weapon born to turn high-level mages into cripples. He continued to mentally torture his opponent with a fatal question about the tragic fate of a mage unable to cast spells. Patton's face turned ashen, his pupils contracted in extreme fear as he realized he had just been stripped of all his power to resist. In his desperation, he tried to activate a fire orb without chanting, but the purple mana only flickered weakly before dying out. Rune snapped the chains on his hands as easily as breaking a dry twig, his entire body erupting with a powerful and arrogant blue aura. He summoned a series of new magic circles, declaring that this torture party was not over with just two simple traps. A blue lightning bolt struck Patton's head with an extremely powerful paralyzing effect, leaving him no time to react. Patton let out a miserable scream as the electric current coursed through his body, completely collapsing his body's ability to resist. The young master fell to the floor, convulsing repeatedly in extreme pain, while Rune coldly watched his prey writhe. Rune stood looking at the defeated foe at his feet with contempt, casually promising to meet again after he woke up to continue the fun. Patton's vision blurred, and he passed out in humiliation, realizing that the positions of hunter and prey had completely reversed. Patton woke up to see Rune perched on a chair, idly twirling the dagger he had just extorted. With a provocative expression, Patton hung upside down like an animal, his hands tightly bound by heavy iron chains. He tugged hard at his hands, testing the chain's durability, as panic began to creep into his mind. The young master roared with hatred upon seeing the one who held power over his life and death. Patton smirked triumphantly, realizing his voice had returned, and that these chains were mere scrap iron, devoid of any monolock. He immediately channeled his power, intending to unleash a wind slash to sever the chains and turn the tables. A surge of blue electricity coursed through his body, making Patton scream in agony, while Rune sat there, watching him with contempt. The mage groaned in pain, utterly bewildered as to the origin of the attack. As no magic circles were visible around him, Rune stepped forward barefoot, his tone sarcastic, stating that he wasn't foolish enough to be unprepared when capturing a mage. He raised the blood-stained dagger, revealing a horrifying truth. The magic formation had already been drawn directly onto the victim's body. A sharp slicing sound echoed in his memory as Rune mercilessly carved into Patton's chest to engrave the magical mark. Patton's pupils constricted to their extreme, as ultimate terror seized his mind upon realizing the source of his pain. Upon Patton's bare chest, a glowing crimson blood magic circle appeared, activating the forbidden art of inscribing formations onto flesh. Rune roared in a frenzy, recalling how Patton had once used awakening spells to torture him, preventing him from losing consciousness. He lightly licked the blood-covered blade, his eyes burning with hatred as he remembered every scar carved onto his 12-year-old body. Patton broke out in a cold sweat, his voice trembling as he asked why a worthless cripple knew such advanced magic. Rune flashed a predator's smile, mocking the garbage intelligence that claimed he couldn't use mana. He proudly declared that all this power stemmed from his past life's memories and his combat experience in Adon. 3 months prior, he had secretly practiced the mana core cultivation technique and mastered the stealth skill, leaving even the maid Colin helpless. Acquiring other skills was as easy as flipping a hand for him, thanks to the secret of the mana circuits he had awakened to. Rune stood atop a mountain of corpses in his master form, asserting that only those at the top of the server truly understood this principle. Rune arrogantly declared that he didn't need to waste time grinding skills or engaging in boring repetitive training like Sena or Alejandro, for he held the shortcut of the strong. As long as he had mana and the qualification, he could instantly apply skills. He activated stealth and glided past the dim-witted Sermon family guards to slip outside. He made his way to this place filled with horrifying memories, and had already laid out a multitude of magic traps, waiting for his prey to walk right into them. Rune looked up at the sky with a blood-soaked smile, thanking the idiot Patton for falling into the trap with ridiculous ease. He held the blood-stained dagger, his sharp eyes fixed on Patton, who writhed in agony from the very magic circle that amplified pain, which Patton himself had intended to use on him. A desperate scream tore through the quiet night outside the desolate tower, signaling a reverse massacre. Patton hung, suspended like a pig awaiting slaughter, blood gushing from his chest, his mouth groaning pleas for it to stop due to the unbearable pain. Rune held the blood-soaked knife with the satisfied expression of a hunter, casually asking if today's playtime was enough. The white-haired young master, his face streaked with tears and snot, stammered denials, then tried to bargain for something in his extreme panic. Patton shrieked that he would give Rune a chance to survive because his family was about to arrive, advising Rune to tuck his tail and run quickly. Rune looked down with contempt, exposing the fact that Patton's sudden kindnesses in telling him to flee was merely because he could no longer endure the torture. He leaned his face close to the trembling prisoner, whispering the death number of 1 week, causing Patton to widen his eyes in horror and ask how he knew. Rune starkly exposed Patton's sick intention to dismiss all the guards for a week so he could privately revel in the pleasure of torturing him. The perverse young master cursed loudly, realizing Rune had been lucid from the start, but still desperately screamed that reinforcements were truly on their way. Rune smirked sarcastically, analyzing that with Patton's garbage personality, there was no way he would ever be kind enough to warn an enemy to escape. He asserted that if anyone truly arrived, Patton would keep his mouth shut and only cowardly beg for his life, waiting for an opportunity to turn the tables. Rune pressed his face close to the panicking Patton, concluding that the young master only wished for his family to arrive so they could kill Rune instead. In Patton's mind, the terrifying subordinate unit of his family appeared, those known as the Fingers of Patton, clad in pitch-black armor reeking of death. Patton strained his neck, screaming in despair, swearing that what he said was true, hoping to salvage a sliver of fragile hope for survival. Rune delivered a brutal uppercut, making the young master spit blood, his head spinning. A glowing crimson magic mark, like molten iron, slowly formed and etched itself deep into Patton's bare chest, causing him extreme agony. Rune coldly declared he would keep his promise not to touch his prey anymore, while Patton hung, suspended by chains, his entire body convulsing. The young master shrieked his enemy's name in despair, blood and tears mingling on his face, contorted with pain. Rune stood proudly amidst the dazzling blue magic circle, a haughty smirk on his face, preparing to welcome his uninvited guests. He knew well that the Patton family's elite unit would arrive here in another week, and that he would absolutely not tolerate any mistakes. Exactly 1 week later, a blood-red sunset enveloped the prison tower, signaling that the hour of judgment had arrived. A group of mysterious figures in black cloaks, exuding an oppressive aura, had gathered directly before the sturdy dungeon door. They discussed how their young master had kidnapped Rune and completely lost contact for the past week, thus forcing them to report to their superiors. The subordinates wondered if there was another way to approach, looking suspiciously at the tightly sealed door. The guard confirmed that they had strictly monitored all entrances and exits, and no one had left this place. The leader clicked his tongue in annoyance, fearing the perverse young master might accidentally kill the hostage. Engrossed in his sick torture game, he raised his magic staff, reiterating the Patriarch's supreme command to capture the target alive at all costs. Ignoring his subordinates' weak pleas, the leader began gathering dark purple energy at the staff's tip, deciding to use force. His glowing purple eyes radiated cold cruelty, asserting that the Patriarch's command was absolute, even for blood relatives like Patton. Boom! A terrifying purple energy explosion blew the sturdy iron door into smithereens, filling the air with thick smoke and dust. The leader stepped through the smoke and dust, ordering his subordinates to stay behind and declaring he would enter alone. He growled, sending the small fry outside to wait, fearing they would only hinder him in the narrow space. The lone assassin's silhouette descended the dark stairs, his footsteps echoing chillingly where death awaited. The leader's heavy footsteps echoed through the deathly night as he ventured deeper into the dungeon alone. He paused, sensing an extremely ominous aura despite detecting no mana whatsoever around him. The moment he stepped down, a green magic circle immediately activated beneath his feet, startling him. The leader reacted incredibly fast, dodging the attack just as the explosive energy surge tried to engulf him. He yelled, "Shield!" and instantly erected a purple protective barrier to block the relentless assault from the deadly trap. Gazing at the complex magic circle, he cursed, certain that something terrible had befallen young Master Patton. He activated his trap detection skill and realized the extremely sophisticated chain reaction mechanism of this magical system. Numerous traps lit up in succession, proving the enemy not only knew the terrain by heart but was also a true master. The leader moved, bitterly speculating who dared to lay this intricate trap network, the Sermon family or a third party. He activated his dual barrier to crush the obstructing traps, deciding to use overwhelming force to break through instead of disarming each one. His face beneath the mask hardened as he declared there was no more time to play games with the hidden enemy. His eyes blazed with killing intent, vowing to make anyone who dared to provoke them regret crossing the fingers of the Patton family. Finally, he reached the cell door, where a flickering torchlight emanated from within the cold iron bars. Pools of fresh blood staining the stone floor were the clearest evidence of a brutal torture session that had just occurred. Inside, Patton hung by iron chains, his entire body mangled with horrific wounds and a glowing red blood sigil on his chest. The leader unleashed an extremely powerful purple energy blast, shattering both the iron doorframe and the chains imprisoning the young master. He rushed in to catch Patton's ravaged body, shouting "Young Master" in utter panic. The shattered chains clattered to the floor, and he hastily embraced Patton, who collapsed like a soulless corpse. Seeing Patton's blood-soaked face and vacant expression, the leader froze, stammering speechless at the horrifying sight. The leader recognized the familiar mana flowing through the young master's veins as the distinctive mark of the Patton family. He turned to look at Rune's bound, motionless body, wondering what in the world had transpired in this bloody dungeon. The young master's life was the top priority. He hastily channeled healing energy and urged his comrades to prepare for retreat. The floor glowed with eerie green magic circles, proving the enemy had laid an intricate trap network, waiting for uninvited guests. The leader glanced at Rune, suspecting that the enemy leaving behind such an easy hostage was undoubtedly a deadly trap. He fully understood that the boy was merely bait, but his family's mission forbade him from abandoning any objective. Patton mumbled deliriously, his dazed eyes trying to convey the true enemy's identity to his subordinate. The young master's face contorted in extreme horror, tears mixing with fresh blood as he recalled the one who had tormented him to this state. The leader gritted his teeth upon hearing the name Rune's sermon uttered from the young master's mouth with bone-deep hatred. To be safe, the leader decided to use sealing magic on the boy, to ensure no one but him could move him. He began chanting, casting a 7th-tier spell called Perfect Binding on Rune to eliminate all risks. A surge of dark purple energy accumulated around the staff, ready to strip away the victim's will and crush their mind to dust. Suddenly, Rune's inverted corpse appeared right before him, mocking his opponent's excessive caution with a sneer. A fireball unexpectedly exploded right above the staff, leaving the leader no time to react to the sneak attack. The explosion sent everything flying. The leader was stunned, realizing he had just been led by the nose by illusion magic, which he had always disdained. He coughed up fresh blood, having been forced to prematurely cancel the 7th-tier spell, suffering a terrifying backlash on his body. Rune's voice echoed, full of sarcasm about the mana backlash pain, while the leader tried to compose himself after the shock. Dozens of Rune's illusions appeared, surrounding him in a green mist, scoffing that he should have dealt with this danger from the start. The enraged leader raised his staff high, roaring to cast a dispel spell to sweep away the irritating illusions that dared to mock an archmage. The leader furiously unleashed dark purple lightning to wipe out the clones. But Rune was not foolish enough to rush into certain death. One of Rune's forms charged directly into the eye of the storm with an arrogant smile, as if strolling through a park. He glided like the wind, leaving behind green afterimages that made the mage dizzy, unable to discern reality from illusion. The moment the hunter's fiery green eyes met the prey's dark purple, killing intent-filled gaze. Wham! Rune launched a flying kick straight into the mage's face, sending him flying backward like a torn sandbag. The leader roared with bitter resentment for being kicked in the face by a useless brat. Insolent. Stab! He counterattacked extremely quickly, plunging the sharp tip of his staff straight into Ryun's abdomen, causing fresh blood to splatter everywhere. Ryun's body was flung far away, rolling on the cold floor with a heavy thud. The mage stood up, his hand gathering a blazing fireball, his voice contemptuous. "Do you think this petty trick can pierce my armor?" He threatened to melt half of Ryun's face, confident that the family head would overlook this excessive action. Ryun's body lay motionless on the floor. It seemed the recent illusion was his last desperate effort. The leader lectured endlessly, believing Ryun had underestimated the power of a finger of Paten. While speaking volubly, he suddenly paused, sensing an unusual surge of mana from beneath the ground. Huh? The dagger that fell to the floor suddenly vibrated violently and glowed green, signaling that the trap had sprung. The mage's pupils constricted, and cold sweat broke out as he realized he had made a fatal mistake. Thwack! A sharp blade suddenly plunged into the mage's throat, fresh blood gushing out like a fountain. The real Ryun materialized right behind him, his hand firmly holding the dagger deeply embedded in the enemy's throat. The mage stammered, "Young master?" while Ryun whispered golden words into his ear. "Your useless arrogance truly grates on my nerves." Ryun sneered, revealing the shocking secret of soul transfer and the blood magic seal currently imprisoning Sun's Paten's soul within this very body. The mage coughed violently, fresh blood gushing from his mouth, while the magic staff in his hand discharged chaotic purple lightning bolts, signaling his collapse. Boom! A massive energy explosion erupted, blowing away everything around in a dazzling orange-yellow light. The mage's metal helmet was flung high into the air, spinning wildly like a broken toy. Clang! The armor piece fell onto the cold stone floor, shattering into pieces like its owner's pride. Ryun stood tall, his bare back covered in crisscrossing wounds, looking down at the defeated foe, trembling at his feet as if looking at a mere insect. Blood streamed down his handsome face, Ryun's eyes glowing with an enchanting green light amidst the magical smoke. He smirked with a wild grin, uttering a concise understood as he sensed the fruits of the battle. Ryun squatted beside the mage's ruined corpse, his sharp eyes scrutinizing the one he had just utterly defeated. He calmly pulled out a blue recovery potion, preparing to restore his appearance after the intense fight. Splash! Ryun poured the potion directly over his head, ignoring the potion mixed with blood flowing down his body, immediately activating his brand new pain resistance skill. He slicked back his drenched hair, muttering that pain was necessary to create false evidence of wounds inflicted by ache on this body. Ryun chuckled maniacally in his throat, water and blood dripping from his chin, exuding a captivating madness. He raised his hands to the sky in excitement, shouting proudly that he had single-handedly hunted down a genuine 7th Circle Archmage. A brilliant golden system panel appeared beside Ryun, who was flexing, showing off his muscles and the magic seals on his chest. Repeated ding sounds echoed, announcing that the quest was complete and his level was skyrocketing. Ryun stopped smiling, his gaze turning serious as he looked at the level-up notification, as if he was calculating something. Boom. The status panel clearly showed Ryun Sermon's name had leaped to level 15, an insane leveling speed. He saw the shadow of his past warrior self superimposed on his current form, telling himself that jumping from level 2 to 15 was natural after defeating a formidable boss like Ache. Not allowing himself to revel in victory, Ryun sharply turned away, his eyes blazing because there was still an important task to be done immediately, with the magic circle. Ryun dragged the soulless corpse of the 7th Circle Archmage, like dragging a sack of garbage towards the laboratory. A long trail of fresh blood stained the cold stone floor, marking the pathetic end of the one who dared to confront him. He threw the corpse onto the sacrificial altar, activating the blazing red magic circle to extract the last bit of value from the boss he had just hunted. Ryun stood bare-chested, flexing to reveal the glowing magic circuit system running along his body, and explained the power etched deep into his soul. His eyes blazed, firmly asserting that even though he was in this weak body, his mana source was still genuinely Ryun's, the phantom of his 100-year warrior soul superimposed on reality, his hands forming seals to control the powerful green mana flow. Ryun's face flushed red from the pressure. He accepted, sacrificing the levels he had just gained to execute this all-in gamble. A ding sound echoed, signaling his level dropping by 5 ranks, the hefty price paid to unlock the hidden condition. The first gamble was a resounding success. He officially unlocked the hidden assassin system class named Shadow. A dazzling golden card appeared, displaying monstrous stats, requiring incredibly high agility and mana stats, which only a madman could achieve at a low level. Sweat drenched him, but Ryun's eyes remained sharp. He knew he still had enough levels to gamble even bigger. Lightning tore across the night sky outside, as if nature itself was screaming at the insane ambition of this monster. Ryun continued to cast magic. A burst of blue energy enveloped his body for the next class change. The system continuously flashed notifications, confirming he had acquired the advanced necromancer system class, Death's Hand. 3 powerful class cards floated above the sacrificed mage's corpse, proof of Ryun's insatiable ambition. The Death's Hand class card displayed an extremely cool image of a Grim Reaper, holding a scythe, requiring a mana stat of 20, and an assassin system main class. Ryun bathed in the eerie green smoke, calculating that slaying the formidable boss had granted him more experience than anticipated. He laughed maniacally as he aimed for the ultimate goal, a legendary hidden class combining assassin and necromancer named Phantom. Ryun clenched his fists in excitement, certain that if this venture succeeded, his plan for domination would proceed flawlessly. Ryun activated the sacrifice without hesitation. The system immediately reported a drop of 5 levels in exchange for a pass to the Gate of Death. Suddenly, his pupils constricted intensely, and a heart-wrenching pain struck him like a hammer blow to his brain. The system warned of severe soul damage, causing Ryun to let out a desperate scream within the magic circle. He gritted his teeth, enduring the sensation of his body being torn into pieces, fearing that the advanced class advancement process would be impossible. Fresh blood gushed from his bloodshot eyes, a terrifying pressure torturing both his body and spirit to their limits. In his delirium, memories of his own lifeless corpse from the past resurfaced, haunting his mind. The hellish scene of old replayed. He saw himself bound on an operating table amidst cold-blooded plague doctors. The white-haired bastard Patton appeared with a twisted smile, a scalpel clutched in his hand, ready to torment his prey in the memory. The image of the blood-soaked old man Alejandro also flooded back, rekindling the inconsolable pain of loss from his previous life. The tragic moment when Alejandro used his body to shield him from dozens of arrows made his heart clench in agony. Next came Sena, the proud female mage of old, now tattered with a shattered mask and covered in wounds. Sena's satisfied smile before dying from a pierced chest only fueled the flames of hatred within him. Ryun smirked wildly, swallowing the pain and transforming his hatred into power to break through his limits. He screamed with fierce determination, vowing that even if he had to sell his soul, he would seize the Phantom class at any cost. In response to that insane will, a violent surge of purple energy erupted, sweeping away all surrounding barriers. Mana currents surged like a storm, roaring and tearing apart the space within the damp, dark dungeon. From the eye of the energy storm, a powerful class card gradually materialized with a dazzling light, signaling success. The system confirmed his soul was vast enough to contain the power, officially unlocking the overpowered hidden class that awaited him. The lock shattered, and a notification appeared, confirming Ryun had successfully advanced to the powerful, advanced Phantom class. The Phantom class card appeared with immense power, confirming it as the supreme tier of the ghost system. Ryun broke out in a cold sweat, his eyes revealing clear surprise as he saw the unfamiliar name Phantom. He looked up at the colossal guardian spirit behind him, admitting he had never seen this class, even after thoroughly grinding the Adon server. The system compared the 2 class cards, affirming that Phantom would inherit and upgrade all the essence from the old ghost class. He wiped blood from his face, a proud smile spreading as he had seized everything he needed in this life-or-death gamble. Ryun stood before the Archmage's corpse, declaring it was time to execute his insane original plan. He stared intently at the corpse, asserting that the innate ability of the ghost class would enhance his soul-summoning skills to a new level. Ryun activated the magic array on his body, revealing that killing the 7th Circle Archmage was merely a stepping stone to acquire materials. The corpse began to glow a deep purple. He only hoped these high-grade materials could withstand the magical pressure. He concentrated intensely, controlling the flow of mana, believing this success would allow him to rapidly accelerate his progress. The system signaled that the ultimate skill, Lich creation, was being activated directly upon the corpse. Though not yet level 70, he dared to use the 7th Circle Archmage's corpse to bypass the rules, forcibly creating a monster. The corpse's eyes blazed, and a violent surge of death energy erupted from its eye sockets and mouth, as if to tear its host apart. Lich creation failed miserably, but the system immediately redirected to the special undead creation process. Ryun's eyes widened in astonishment at the unexpected variable, which was outside his calculations. A ghostly feminine shadow unexpectedly burst forth from the purple smoke, forcing him to raise his arm to block. A torrent of death energy swirled wildly around Ryun, signaling the birth of an extraordinary entity. A cool, undead female warrior in black armor hovered in midair, marking the perfectly successful creation process. A mysterious smile formed on the new entity's lips. The system immediately prompted him to name this overpowered subordinate. Ryun unleashed the wound aggravation skill, activating a deadly blue magic circle that crushed his opponent from above. The green-skinned monster shrieked miserably as countless invisible blades tore through its flesh, fresh blood splattering everywhere. Streams of dark purple curse energy burrowed deep into the monster's body, causing it extreme agony, its mouth spewing gurgling cries. Ryun coldly observed his enemy writhing in the dark energy, confirming this was the overwhelming effect of a curse-type skill. His gaze was as sharp as a razor, as he cruelly commanded, "Stop struggling and just die." Unexpectedly, the monster erupted with power, its eyes glowing purple and muscles bulging, activating its berserk state with a wind-rending shriek. Ryun broke out in a cold sweat, realizing his opponent had just activated a pain-blocking mode and unleashed insane power to fight him to the death. The monster swung its spear horizontally, creating a terrifying wave of pressure. Ryun knew full well that a direct confrontation now would be suicide. He immediately switched tactics to overwhelming numbers, activating the Raise Dead skill with a confident smile. Bright green magic circles glowed on the ground, as skeletal hands began to claw their way out of the earth. The skeletal soldiers emerged from the realm of the dead in magical light, obeying the absolute command of the necromancer. An entire army of undead with glowing green eye sockets charged forward like a storm, their growls echoing through the space. The monster in its berserk state roared with an earth-shattering sound, ready to crush the small fry blocking its path. Ryun stood between two bandaged corpses, declaring coolly that now it truly felt like a boss raid. He recalled his previous failure when he used the corpses of the Ani group for experiments but couldn't create a rare specimen like Kornak. However, that failure had opened a new path for power development, and he waved his hand, activating a powerful blue magic circle. The undead enhancement skill was activated, a surge of energy enveloping one of the two floating mummified corpses. Next was soul sacrifice, as countless green souls were drawn into the center of the magic circle to serve as fuel. The system announced he had used a night soul, summoning a beautiful purple female warrior spirit to buff his subordinates. Not stopping there, he continued to burn a mage soul, summoning an enchanting female mage spirit with a sinister smile. The system announced that Kornak had been permanently buffed and had his memories unlocked. Ryun immediately ordered him to display the authority of a commander. The monster Kornak let out a terrifying roar, its berserk aura shaking the entire space and striking fear into the lesser undead. Ryun flashed a wild smile, his eyes glowing brightly like a madman reveling in the pinnacle of power and destruction. His face transformed with a vibrant purple energy mask, as he coldly ordered his legion to finish off everyone, leaving no one alive. The scene shifted outside, where the red-haired Kyle Daron was using the Patton family's name to intimidate the guards, attempting to conceal the scene. The sermon guard was equally stubborn, immediately drawing his sword and warning anyone not to take another step. A powerful stomp echoed with a thud, making the ground tremble and startling the guard. Alejandro emerged from the darkness with the demeanor of an elder statesman, his cloak fluttering proudly and radiating pressure. The old general took a drag from his pipe, his sharp eyes emitting a chilling, killing intent that seemed to freeze the surrounding air. He stood firm like a mountain, challenging the small fry to see what they would dare do if he took another step. Alejandro's face hardened as he roared, declaring he would slaughter all the scum who dared block his path to find the young master. Kyle Daron still stubbornly argued about territorial infringement to cover up his dirty scheme. Alejandro cursed the bastards who started the war directly and demanded they hand over Ryun immediately. The red-haired man maintained an annoyingly calm expression, asserting that all his suspicions were certain, attempting to mislead them. He pointed towards the smoking ruins, deliberately steering the narrative to favor the Patton family and blame others. Kyle Daron brazenly slandered, claiming that the Patton family's appearance was merely to cover up what had happened there. He continued to play the victim, lamenting that their young master, Sons Patton, was also mysteriously missing. Kyle Daron brushed past Alejandro, requesting cooperation in the search, but only received a contemptuous shut up from the old general. The red-haired man's veins pulsed on his forehead in anger, as he gnashed his teeth and warned that no one was to search the scene without an investigation order. Alejandro said, little, his hand gathering blue lightning magic, ready for a fist-to-fist conversation with the arrogant prince. Alejandro unhesitatingly unleashed a burst of blue lightning killing intent, his eyes blazing with fury as if he wanted to crush his opponent immediately. Kyle Daron was no pushover either. He sneered contemptuously, emitting a malevolent pinkish-purple aura to retaliate against the old general. Trunehilda stood frozen amidst the battlefield, his face pale as he witnessed the fierce confrontation between the two factions. Suddenly, a burst of fire erupted behind him, and an illusion of Sena appeared, her voice sharp as she asked who allowed him to speak so loudly. The head butler trembled uncontrollably, sweating profusely as he heard the two words traitor echo in his ears. Sena blazed with red flames, flatly declaring that if it weren't for the young master's message, he would have been reduced to ashes long ago. One of Sena's eyes flashed with an eerie green light, as she ordered him to shut his mouth and focus on finding the young master. Trunehilda swallowed hard, recalling Ryun's instructions that he would leave a special trail to follow. He mumbled about the Sermon family's exclusive blue earth cultivation method that Ryun had mentioned. The butler began to concentrate intensely, trying to sense even the slightest mana resonance remaining in the space. A network of green mana began to spread, sweeping across every inch of the dark forest. Suddenly, a strong feedback signal appeared on the magic radar, indicating the target had been found. The stream of green energy converged into a guiding arrow, tearing through the night and shooting straight forward. The trail led directly to a massive ancient tree, deep within the dense forest. Trunehilda's eyes widened in astonishment, his face paling as he witnessed the bizarre sight before him. A pair of bare feet dangled in midair, surrounded by an eerie, haunting green smoke. Patton was hanging upside down from a tree branch by chains, his entire body motionless like a broken puppet. The once arrogant young master now hung limply like a soulless corpse, his disheveled platinum hair obscuring his pathetic face. On his tattered shirt, across his chest, was a crimson, humiliating message. I am the kidnapper, punish me. On the ground, a letter was held down by a stone, emitting a green light like Ryun's final challenge. Sena appeared with an icy demeanor, her sharp eyes hidden behind a mysterious blue mask. The butler, Trunehilda, frantically pointed towards the letter, while Sena began to approach this crucial piece of evidence. She intently read the letter's contents, completely unaware that Ryun's spirit was standing right behind her, observing everything. Ryun smirked, admitting he once intended to possess the young master Patton's body to destroy that family from within. However, he dismissed that idea, because the old man leading the Patton family was an 8th Circle mage, more than capable of detecting such a soul-swapping trick. He continued to analyze that returning to the Sermon family as Ryun right now would ruin everything. A bloody war between the two great families could erupt at any moment, and this kidnapping incident would be the perfect excuse for the enemy faction. The Sermon family was currently just an empty shell, completely lacking the capability to withstand such an all-out war. Ryun raised a calculating finger, deciding he had to choose a third option to achieve both goals. Before disappearing completely from the scene, he needed to leave the most plausible explanation for this charade. It had to be a perfect reason that even someone as suspicious and sharp as Sena would nod in acceptance. The letter in Sena's hand suddenly burst into a monstrous green flame, making Trunehilda break out in a cold sweat. The magical flame quickly incinerated the evidence to ashes, erasing all traces related to Ryun. Sena turned and ordered the butler to return to the Sermon family, her eyes glinting with calculation after finishing the letter. From now on, there would be a mountain of colossal tasks to resolve, cleaning up the mess left by this charade. The crimson sunset enveloped the ancient castle, signaling that a new, turbulent chapter was about to begin. A hawk spread its wings and soared high into the vast sky, its fofo cry echoing through the air. 3 months later in the capital, a figure in a brown cloak was running frantically through the bustling streets. A burly craftsman cheerfully called out, saying the guildmaster was looking for him and urged him to come to the guild hall immediately. He turned, revealing sharp green eyes. Ryun was now hidden under the name Rion, the Dragon of Drea. The populace was buzzing with talk about the intense clash between the Patton and Sermon families, to the point where the royal family had to intervene to de-escalate the situation. Ryun, disguised as Rion with fake blue hair, strolled leisurely, listening to rumors about the traitor who had kidnapped the Sermon family's last heir. The crowd whispered that the Sermon family had swallowed their humiliation and accepted compensation money from the Patton side instead of escalating the matter. An apple flew through the air amidst speculations about the decline of the Sermon family, as the Golden Dragon Master had been absent for too long. Ryun coolly caught the apple with one hand, while the blacksmith beside him clicked his tongue, lamenting the once illustrious noble family that had fallen from grace. A secluded alley led to a building displaying a purple banner with an ominous black raven emblem. This was the Painton branch of the Martin Assassin Guild, a den harboring those who lived in the shadows. Inside, a seductive female assassin sat cross-legged, listening to the common folk curse the Sermon family for being greedy and abandoning their child. The woman ate while resting her chin in her hand, a bored expression on her face, not caring about the trashy political matters outside. Sapphire, the branch manager and level 2 assassin, let out a bored sigh, stating that everyone already knew these rumors. She sat drinking beer with Duns and brushed aside the old news. But the bearded man steered the conversation to the execution of Chief Steward Truno. The beer mug was slammed onto the table as the truth was revealed. Truno had colluded with the Patton family's traitor. Duns gravely recounted how Alejandro had personally beheaded the traitor on the spot, without the need for a lengthy trial. Sapphire broke out in a cold sweat, never expecting a noble swordmaster to personally carry out such a bloody executioner's task. The heavy wooden door creaked open with a jarring sound, interrupting the two assassins' conversation. Rune entered the tavern, immediately drawing the gaze of both Sapphire and Duns as they greeted him by his false name, Rion. The young boy naturally greeted Uncle Duns, and the bearded man immediately knew he was there to see the manager. The scene shifted to a quiet, sun-drenched private room, where the real transaction was about to take place. Sapphire was already waiting, staring intently at the young boy and confirming that the fated day had finally arrived. The female assassin held out an envelope with a crimson seal, her sharp eyes questioning if he knew what it was. Sapphire called Rion's name, holding a letter of introduction confirming his official membership in the Martin Guild. The young boy smirked meaningfully, his expression exuding the confidence of one holding all the cards. He subtly hinted that there was still one final test yet to be performed, making Sapphire chuckle in agreement. The female assassin pushed the envelope forward, declaring this would be his first real combat mission, but Rion retorted, asking if this test would be meaningless given his skill level. Sapphire rose authoritatively under the banner of the Martin Painton branch, recalling his rapid tower ascent achievement in a mere 2 months. Rion's emerald eyes gleamed with cold sharpness as he listened to the other party prattle on about his records. She spared no praise, hailing him as a once-in-a-century genius, the youngest person to break all records for guild entry time. Rion feigned humility before a level 2 assassin and branch manager, but she immediately exposed his underlying cunning. Sapphire took a sip of tea, remarking that his demeanor was now much improved compared to the gloomy face he wore when they first met. Rion hesitated, about to explain his past, but memories flooded back first. It was a torrential rainy night 2 months ago. The moment destiny began to unfold. The heavy wooden door of the tavern creaked open, marking the intruder's first step. A small, cloaked figure silently entered this little-known assassin's den. His mud-stained face was hidden behind the hood, but his emerald eyes exuded an overwhelming and formidable aura. Sapphire was so stunned, she broke into a sweat upon seeing the beggar boy unceremoniously toss a huge bag of gold onto the table. Despite his tattered appearance like a mendicant, his eyes blazed with deadly resolve as he made his assassination request. The manager in the memory was drenched in cold sweat, completely overwhelmed by the uninvited guest's insane presence and enormous sum of money. Returning to the present, Rion sarcastically recalled the rumor that this guild would accept any job as long as there was money. He exposed how her attitude had done a 180-degree turn the moment she saw the commission fee, switching to a serve the gods mode. Sapphire hastily justified that she wasn't solely motivated by money, but rather by an intuition that told her this beggar boy, carrying a massive fortune, was an extremely interesting case. Sapphire was dumbfounded when Rion made the bizarre request to commission his own assassination. Rion smirked meaningfully, holding the envelope sealed with bright red wax as if he had the other party cornered. He placed the storm lantern on the table, signaling for the manager to privately examine the contents within. Rion held up the envelope to conclude, instructing her to call him back when the test was ready. The wooden door clicked shut, and the boy vanished after dropping a bombshell of information that left people bewildered. Sapphire stood frozen in the room, still reeling from the transaction, reeking of danger and mystery. A ghostly purple aura gathered behind her, slowly forming the silhouette of a shadow operative. Carl, the raven-masked operative, stepped out of thin air, questioning Sapphire's decision to accept the new recruit. He emphasized that Rion had completed the entire rigorous assassin training course in just 1 month. That was an immense volume of skills that ordinary people would have to toil for 5 to 10 years to master. Sapphire turned to look at her subordinate, pressing him on whether he had thoroughly investigated the background of that monster. Carl began reporting on Ryan's profile. No surname, blue hair, green eyes, adopted and raised by an unknown master. The story continued with the incident of that master suddenly vanishing without a trace. His sole purpose for joining this assassin's guild was to search for clues about his lost master. Sapphire shivered, recalling how the boy dared to wager his own life on the test. Carl confirmed that thanks to that insane wager, his combat skills were immediately verified. The masked man held the report, his tone still tinged with doubt even though everything matched. However, the glowing eyes behind his mask confirmed that all information Rune declared was 100% true. Carl had personally ventured to the remote wooden house deep in the forest where Rune once lived to verify the information. Sapphire broke into a cold sweat as she pieced together the clues, hypothesizing that Rune was the missing young master, Rune's sermon. Sapphire still felt uneasy. Her sharp intuition told her that things weren't simply a coincidence. Carl dismissed the possibility of Rune being the former person, but Sapphire still wondered why her gut feeling was so unsettling. He brought up Rune's sermon's utterly worthless past for comparison. From mana to swordsmanship, he was an absolute zero. Carl asserted that there was no way the good-for-nothing of the sermon family could be the monster Rune, who was currently making waves here. Carl intended to continue digging, but Sapphire unhesitatingly tore up the report, concluding that the game ended here. She decided not to waste a talent like Rune on trivial matters, while the subject himself was huddled quietly in the room. Rune smirked, his emerald eyes blazing as he recalled the excuse of searching for his master, which he had just fabricated to fool the world. He secretly appreciated the branch manager Sapphire's sharp, almost bothersome, intuition. Rune summoned a green willow, the wisp, asserting that the soul summoner skill was incredibly convenient as long as there were wandering souls. It turned out he had planted eyes and ears everywhere, listening to the entire conversation of those two through his green spirit subordinate. Rune uttered a command to open his status window, checking his new gains after the recent charade. The information panel appeared, confirming Rune's sermon's identity, along with the formidable hidden class Death's Hand at level 13. He was delighted to see that all the levels consumed during the class change had been fully returned to him. Rune stood up, enveloped in a green aura, affirming that pouring mana into the body control skill was an extremely profitable move. He confidently declared this disguise ability was more than enough to fool even a level 2 assassin's detection skills without expending any effort. Rune bared his torso and tensed his body. A fierce surge of dark purple death energy erupted to summon a special entity from the void. A female warrior spirit materialized in a magical light, proudly asking her master if he wished to name her. Rune flashed a sinister smile, calling out the name Cornac, as the spirit began to take clear form beside him. The undead female warrior appeared small in stature, wearing a half-mask and exuding a chilling, killing intent. Rune's eyes widened as he looked at his new subordinate's stats panel, realizing this was a rare find. An undead capable of leveling up just like a player. Rune carefully examined the card, displaying the true form of the phantom class he had just acquired. With curiosity, finding no specific skill descriptions, he decided to directly interfere with the magical circuit to inspect it. He activated his magic eye, allowing streams of green data to flow across his face as he infiltrated the system. His eye spun wildly, delving deep into the core data to decipher the mysteries of this world. A hidden quest panel titled The Revenger unexpectedly appeared, with all its description and reward information concealed. Rune concluded that this type of hidden quest, requiring special conditions, should not inherently exist on the continent of Drea. He realized that this quest's activation mechanism was directly linked to the game system's magical circuit. He concluded that Cornac was born from the combination of the hidden quest and the Death's Hand classes he had just acquired. Although Cornac was currently just a useless mana-guzzling machine, Rune believed it would soon become his main weapon. The scene shifted to a moonlit night. Rune sat perched on a watchtower, contemplating his upcoming leveling path. He stood up, facing the wind, asserting that a master's vision always looks towards the future, not the present. Duns unexpectedly appeared behind him, wondering why a contestant would be so pensive right at the examination grounds. Rune immediately put on his innocent facade, boasting about his dream of becoming a guild branch leader to deceive the old man. Duns sternly interrupted his fanciful thoughts, signaling that the real test was about to begin. 3 contestants stood in formation under the moonlight, listening to the brutal rules of the final round. Duns declared this was the decisive test to officially become a level 5 assassin of the Marton Guild. The first opponent to reveal himself was Pala, a blonde man with sharp, cold eyes full of killing intent. Next was Rune, the short-haired, blue-haired woman with a cold, emotionless expression. Finally, Rune's name was called. He maintained the deadly composure of a predator. Duns concluded the life or death rules, asserting that only whoever successfully assassinated the target would earn a ticket to join the guild. Duns growled, declaring the official test had begun. The atmosphere was tense as a stretched bowstring. The old man turned his back and walked along the city wall, demanding the new recruits spill information about the target. Pala eagerly showed off his knowledge about the prey named Alok, a 47-year-old merchant who appeared quite portly. He knew well that old Alok always kept 3 mercenaries by his side, including a formidable silver-ranked mage. The blonde man had also dug up some bedroom gossip about the target having recently acquired a fresh, young concubine. Alok's nightly visit schedule was also known to Pala, as the guards had to wait outside the door. Duns nodded, praising the youngster's investigative skills, even though he had only provided the target's name. He highly valued their ability to assess the guard's strength to find ways to avoid direct confrontation. But the old man suddenly changed tack, asking pointedly if they were sure the target would visit his concubine's room tonight. Pala broke out in a cold sweat, his fingers trembling, speechless before the question that struck at the fatal weakness of his plan. Duns delivered a final blow, challenging whether the rookies were skilled enough to deal with the guards if the plan happened to go south. He emphasized that was the reason the Martin Guild had to gather exhaustive information before acting to minimize risks. The old man's gaze shifted to Ryan, the last name who remained mysteriously silent. Duns gestured with his chin, asking Ryan to share what he had dug up with the group. Ryan smirked arrogantly, uttering a chilling remark. "Why on earth should I tell you?" The entire group froze, their eyes wide and mouths agape at Ryan's superior and uncooperative attitude. He coldly poured cold water on them, reminding them that this was a life-or-death race, with only one sole winner. Pala and Rune openly showed their resentment, bringing up the cheap label of colleagues to criticize his selfishness. Ryan scoffed at the 2 naive individuals, asserting that no school had ever taught the words comradeship in this place. Duns stroked his beard in satisfaction, concluding that Ryan's cruel answer was precisely the survival truth of an assassin. Ryan stood proudly amidst the magical light, declaring the hunt had begun with the demeanor of a true mastermind. He stood on the rooftop, watching his opponents jump down and scatter in all directions, making a condescending remark about their potential. Duns leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his eyes full of doubt as he questioned the mission to assassinate this arrogant kid. Sapphire explained the rules of the death game with a 3-day limit, and confirmed the target was protected by an entire legion of mercenaries. The manager finalized a crazy condition. Ryan had to be registered as a special intern right at this branch. Duns's jaw dropped, sweat pouring down his face, believing Sapphire had completely lost her mind by making that decision. Ryan sneered at the black-clad crowd, declaring he would only need less than 10 minutes to drag them out, not 3 days. Upon hearing this, the interns' faces turned ashen, completely demoralized and feeling defeated before they even began. A voice rang out, full of admiration for the incredible traps and schemes that Monster Kid had set up. Sapphire declared she would keep her promise to begin training, while Rune stood beside her with a sullen, calculating expression. Duns and Sapphire reviewed the bounty files, acknowledging that becoming an official Martong assassin was a hellish challenge. Sapphire held the order, emphasizing that this target had the highest difficulty ever personally assigned by the branch manager. Rune, in her masked assassin outfit, darted swiftly across the rooftops, telling herself she was facing an important historical moment. The cold moonlight shone down upon the rooftops, where the hunt began to unfold in silent darkness. Rune landed as lightly as a cat with a soft sound, beginning to execute her own daring infiltration plan. She glided like the wind, confidently displaying her skills in bypassing both magical warning spells and intricate mechanical traps. Rune slipped past the guards smoothly, but was surprised by the larger number of mercenaries than expected. A shout of "intruder" rang out, and Rune pressed herself into a dark corner, her sharp eyes observing the situation. The guards were distracted and chased another target into the distance, overlooking Rune's hiding spot. Rune sneered, cursing Pala for being foolish, admitting she had cruelly turned him into a decoy to ensure her own safety. Alok fled frantically with his protecting mage, his face drained of all color, terrified of being assassinated. The whole group rushed into the first wife's bedroom, where 2 guards stood watch as diligently as stone statues. The sound of bare feet stomping heavily on the floor signaled another rage, even more terrifying than an assassin. The first wife appeared with a furious expression, loudly yelling about Alok daring to bring both his mistress and assassins home. Alok, sweating profusely, tried to explain to his wife that the assassin situation was not his fault, and that this room was very safe. From above, Rune squinted, assessing the reinforced defenses and the sudden surge in mercenaries. She realized with satisfaction that the elite guards had all been lured away by Pala, leaving a perfect opening for her to act. Rune activated her senses, determining that only 5 insignificant guards remained nearby, not worth bothering with. The female assassin drew her dagger, deciding to use drastic measures to sweep through directly and finish the mission. Below in the bedroom, Alok frantically raised his hand to stop his wife, seeing her hold a dangerous object with a deranged expression. The wife lunged forward in the dim light. Her long-suppressed restraint had reached its breaking point. She held the knife, trembling violently, tearfully recounting the grievances she had endured. Alok was scared out of his wits when his wife exposed his shameless act of taking money from her family to spend. The harsh truth was revealed when his wife screamed that he used that money to buy gifts, to win over that vixen. Unable to control her rage, the wife plunged the knife into her husband's chest, causing Alok to let out a desperate scream before collapsing. Rune was about to leap down but froze, her eyes wide with astonishment, because the target had been kill-stolen right under her nose. The woman stood panting, her entire body trembling, while her wretched husband's blood splattered onto her pristine white nightgown. The blood-stained knife fell to the floor, making a chilling clatter, ending the family tragedy. The wife looked down at her blood-soaked hands, stammering in extreme panic, unable to believe what she had just done. The guards' voices echoed from outside, asking about the situation, while the mistress stood frozen beside her husband's corpse. Rune was utterly bewildered to see the target stabbed to death by his wife, wondering whether this counted as a win or a loss. She suddenly noticed a huge anomaly. Rune hadn't even bothered to show his face at the scene yet. The cold moonlight enveloped the mansion, where the bloody family drama had just unfolded. Rune stood on the wall with a face full of utter disappointment, asserting that this mission was a complete failure. She covered her mouth, pondering Alok's death. Everything had happened too suddenly and was full of absurdity. Rune reported back to Judge Duns that the target had been dealt with by the first wife, not by their hands. Duns stood with his arms crossed, listening to the report, a profound, unreadable expression on his face under the torchlight. Rune squinted suspiciously, noticing the strangely calm demeanor of the bearded judge. She began to question whether Rune had actually participated in the mansion raid with them from the start. Rune and Paula were panting like oxen, drenched in sweat after running for their lives back to the rendezvous point. Paula, in a battered state, recounted how the mercenaries suddenly turned on each other, allowing him to narrowly escape death. He recalled the recent chaos, taking advantage of the enemy's internal strife to scale the wall and slip away just in time. Duns clapped his hands loudly, declaring the test over, but concluded with a shocking statement. The mission was not a failure at all. Ryan stood there with a cold, arrogant expression, as Duns declared he had completed the mission brilliantly. Both Rune and Paula's jaws dropped, and they shouted in astonishment at this unbelievable result. Duns explained that the wife personally ending her husband's life was the perfect scenario that had been set up beforehand. He affirmed that this was Rune's supreme skill, using someone else's hand to kill without breaking a sweat. The examiner pointed directly at him and called Rune's name with absolute recognition for his strategic thinking. The truth was revealed. Ryan had used magical puppet strings to manipulate the wife's mind, turning her into a puppet to kill Alok. Rune and Paula froze in shock, their faces falling as they realized the immense difference in level between them and the monster Rune. Duns pressed for confirmation that Rune had manipulated the wife into personally sending her husband to his death. The old examiner demanded a satisfactory explanation, while Rune maintained his poker face. Rune and Paula were clearly annoyed, guessing that this guy was about to spout some irritatingly boastful words to show off. Rune smirked, his sharp gaze full of the confidence of one holding all the cards. Both trainees were startled, and cold sweat began to pour from them under his overwhelming aura. He began to analyze the rotten love triangle between Alok, his wife Kelly, and the busty mistress. Rune calmly admitted that he had exploited the target family's internal strife to deliver a fatal blow. Rune angrily questioned him, suspecting he had received secret information from the branch manager beforehand. Rune immediately refuted this, asserting that he only knew the target's name at the same time as them. It was simply that old Alok was too famous. He confirmed that the information about the guards and the mistress's bedroom was perfectly accurate, not a single detail off. Rune raised a finger and concluded with a chilling statement. He had already investigated everything ages ago. Rune and Paula's faces drained of color upon hearing this, utterly shocked by the harsh truth. The blue-haired girl cried out in confusion, asking how he could have investigated when he didn't even know who the target was. It sounded utterly illogical. Rune stood before the bounty board, declaring that he had gathered information on everyone in this city who smelled like a potential assassination target. He had devoured 2 months' worth of curriculum in just 1 month, using the remaining time to prepare methods to kill each person on the blacklist. The two competitors fell silent upon hearing this, realizing they were comparing themselves to a monster who had memorized the entire server's dictionary. During his reconnaissance, Rune had sensed the intense hatred of the wife, Kelly, for her despicable husband. He had approached Kelly just as she was being psychologically cornered by her husband's philandering ways. Rune offered her a cruel solution, secretly hire assassins to intimidate her husband, not to kill him outright. The plan was to hire mercenaries to scare Alok out of his wits, forcing him to flee to the safest place, his wife's room, exactly as Rune intended. Rune explained the clever move was to instigate the wife to blame the assassination attempt on the mistress and her lover to divert suspicion. He painted a scenario where Alok would be scared witless, come to his senses, and return to cling to his wife, begging for safe protection. In that scenario, the mercenaries would play the villains, cornering Alok and leaving him no choice but to trust his wife absolutely. Rune smirked, revealing another decisive blow. Just before the critical moment, he had slipped an anonymous, fatal letter to the wife. The letter's content exposed Alok taking black money from his wife's family to support and buy luxurious gifts for his mistress. Examiner Duns broke out in a cold sweat, realizing this kid not only planned but also psychologically manipulated the victim from start to finish. Rune gasped in astonishment, realizing the entire test had been in this monster's palm from the very first minute. Pala and Rune looked blankly, wondering if they had inadvertently played a role as pawns in this insane scenario. Duns still had questions, believing that no matter how angry, a normal wife would hardly stab her husband so decisively. Rune smirked cunningly, admitting he had given her a little push to ensure she had enough courage to act cruelly. He casually recounted how he had snuck into Alok's wine cellar and added a special alchemical potion to the wine barrel. Rune nonchalantly explained that, fearing he might accidentally cause too many casualties, he had mixed the potion into the mercenaries' drinking water as well, just to be safe. This potion had the side effect of clouding the mind and stimulating extreme aggression, turning everything into bloody chaos. Pala turned pale upon hearing this, realizing that the mercenaries suddenly turning on each other was also due to the stimulant potion. Rune clutched her head in helplessness, realizing she had not only lost in skill but was utterly outmatched in her opponent's cunning and ruthlessness. The assassin's face flushed, her heart pounding, too impressed by Rune's terrifyingly perfect strategic thinking. Rune concluded the matter. The leaked information combined with the stimulant had turned the wife into a crazed killer who ended Alok's life on the spot. Sapphire smiled contentedly at the excellent performance, officially declaring Rune had passed this rigorous test. Rune wasn't stopping there. He calculated to pocket both the commission from the mission and the extra reward from the wife, Kelly. He winked slyly, affirming to the group that to outsiders, this was an assassination carried out by an assassin, while the truth would forever remain their secret. Kelly trembled in extreme panic, willing to spend more money to turn her husband's murder into a professional assassination contract to cover up her crime. Duns broke out in a cold sweat, his eyes wavering intensely upon realizing the terrifying true nature and ruthlessness of the person before him. The examiner had to bitterly admit that Rune's skill level was on an entirely different plane, far exceeding all conventional standards. Rune's face flushed crimson, glancing at Rune. She reluctantly accepted second place, knowing she stood no chance against this monster. Duns ordered the two remaining examinees to return to the guild hall first, because he needed a serious private talk with Rune. Rune and Pala immediately obeyed, leaping off the rooftop, leaving private space for the two leaders to resolve their conflict. Duns crossed his arms over his chest, his expression grave, as if about to pass a death sentence on Rune's conscience. He growled, asking Rune if he truly understood the terrible consequences of what he had just done. The examiner indignantly criticized Rune for making Kelly live in torment and guilt for personally killing her husband for the rest of her life. He could not accept the fact that an ordinary woman was manipulated to become a cold-blooded killer who murdered her own husband. Duns declared firmly that the Assassin's Guild trained professional assassins, not inhumane monsters. He began to bring up Alok's repeated bringing of mistresses home to justify the complexity of the matter and Kelly's crime. The naked truth was revealed when all those mistresses had already been secretly and cruelly eliminated by Kelly beforehand. Duns admitted that Alok was a scumbag who had ruined countless lives with drugs and gambling, but still tried to maintain a moral stance. Kelly never directly showed her face, but always used her family's power to clean up the bodies of the unfortunate mistresses. Rune clutched his chest, feigning pain, but his mouth spewed sharp words, exposing the corruption and cover-ups of Kelly's family. He coldly pointed out that the families of those victims were desperately searching for their loved ones in vain because they dared not oppose Kelly's influence. Rune sneered contemptuously, retorting whether a client's conscience or circumstances were something an assassin needed to care about. He delivered a fatal psychological blow by asking if conscience interfered with assassination. Would killing for money become more noble? Duns was speechless when Rune concluded that no matter how much Kelly suffered, the guild still received its full payment. And that was the practical truth of the assassin's profession. Duns broke out in a cold sweat, his voice trembling as he asked again if conscience was truly superfluous for assassins. Rune stood high above, looking down like a king, delivering a chilling statement that if one wanted to retain humanity, they should first focus on cultivating power. He jumped down decisively, sarcastically stating that, as long as one worked for the Assassin's Guild, searching for a conscience was just nonsense. Rune landed softly with a thud, his cloak billowing, his arrogant demeanor making others look up in awe. The scene shifted to outside the guild hall, where the test, filled with the scent of blood and practical philosophy, had concluded. Rune smirked, his sharp, confident eyes belonging to one who had just outmaneuvered all the examiners. Sapphire happily announced that Rune had officially passed the test and become a member of the Martin Guild. The system panel displayed a mission complete notification, a ding-ding sound echoing in his head like a victory jingle. Rune bathed in the light of leveling up, feeling power surging through his body after his masterful performance. A series of notifications appeared. He not only leveled up, but also completed a lucrative side quest. Rune smirked triumphantly, while Duns and Paula stood behind, applauding in admiration, completely captivated by him. The system confirmed he had gained the favor of the NPCs and reaped a hefty amount of experience points. Sapphire began to impart knowledge, explaining that, as a rank 5 assassin, he could now accept official missions. She raised a finger, listing the promotion requirements. First, completing a contract worth over 30 gold. The next condition sounded tougher. Successfully completing 10 rank 5 missions without a hitch. Finally, he needed sponsorship from a branch manager or a rank 3 assassin, but she guessed he wouldn't rush to rank up just yet. Rune interrupted her thoughts with a money-reeking question about the remuneration for Alok's recent assassination. The surrounding trainees and even Sapphire were dumbfounded, not understanding what this monster was planning. Rune maintained his cunning smile, pressing for the specific amount, which made Sapphire feel uneasy. Sapphire had to confess that this contract paid 10 gold up front and another 10 gold upon completion. The surrounding trainees' eyes widened in shock, breaking out in a cold sweat at the new recruit's arrogant disregard for everyone. Rune confidently asserted that he had flawlessly completed the mission, claiming the full reward and more than meeting the financial conditions. He leaned close to Sapphire's face with a sly grin, questioning her about the 30 gold rule, leaving her speechless. Sapphire gritted her teeth, veins throbbing on her forehead, as a subordinate cornered her in front of everyone. Rune pointed directly at the manager's face, boldly declaring his desire to be promoted to rank 4 assassin immediately, as rank 5 Rune. The atmosphere grew taut as Sapphire stepped forward, her killing intent surging, causing the surrounding crowd to murmur and whisper. Her eyes glowed menacingly red, warning the boy that he was too arrogant and didn't know his place. In response to that deadly killing intent, there was only Rune's contemptuous and challenging smirk. Sapphire acknowledged his impressive achievements, but maintained a firm stance, believing he was disrespecting the organization. She raised her hand, explaining the unchangeable rules and policies of the Assassin's Guild that everyone had to obey. According to her, only upon reaching rank 4 is an assassin considered genuine and acknowledged by their peers in the profession. Sapphire criticized Rune for disregarding all necessary procedures for accumulating experience and skills, rushing his rank progression. Her gaze sharpened, warning that even if he met the requirements, such an arrogant attitude would only lead to him being ostracized and hated by the entire guild. She tossed her hair and turned away, intending to dismiss this outrageous proposal by claiming he was tired after his first mission, to save face for both of them. Rune immediately cut her off with a cold no, firmly refusing to withdraw his promotion application even a single step. Sapphire spun around, furious, and yelled that he needed to be more cautious if he wanted to live long in such a dangerous place. Suddenly, Duns stepped forward to intervene, raising a hand to halt the branch manager's impending outburst of rage. As the direct supervisor of the test, the bearded man requested to offer an objective opinion on this special case. Rune stood there with an impassive expression, while Duns began to speak in his defense, much to the crowd's astonishment. Duns firmly asserted that Rune was fully qualified to test for rank 4, as he hadn't revealed all his trump cards during the previous examination. Sapphire pressed him about the core elements of an assassin, while Rune merely smirked meaningfully, as if taunting his superior. The bearded old man Duns analyzed that although Rune won with a sharp mind, the promotion test also required pure physical strength, not just trap-setting tricks. The two youths, Rune and Paula, broke out in a cold sweat, their faces falling as they realized Rune had completely manipulated them with his masterful tactics. Not by luck, the entire council wanted to seize this opportunity to teach the arrogant rookie a lesson he would never forget, or at least to gauge his true strength. The trainees clamored in agreement, their faces bitter, as they recalled being herded into traps like ducks by Rion in the previous test. Sapphire bit her lip in frustration, reluctantly accepting the rookie's stubbornness, as she had no further reason to refuse. She pointed directly at Rion, declaring that he was permitted to participate in the Rank 4 test, a place where even professional assassins had to bet their lives. The female manager leaned close, her eyes sharp, and growled, asking if he was truly ready to risk his life for this insane decision. A firm handshake confirmed the risky wager between the arrogant rookie and the branch management. Rion responded with a sinister smile, his green eyes flashing with malevolence, as if he had long awaited this moment to unleash his full potential. Night fell, enveloping the inn where a private meeting took place after the day's tensions at the guild hall. The loud thud of a beer mug hitting the table sent foam splashing, shattering the silent atmosphere to emphasize the gravity of the matter. Duns, sitting opposite, sighed wearily, deeming Rion's act of provoking the management as overly reckless and thoughtless. Sapphire rested her chin in her hand, scrutinizing Rion. She knew full well that this monster never did anything without meticulous planning behind it. The alluring waitress brought out drinks, interrupting their conversation, and announced that the test would begin in at least a month to prepare a suitable target. The kind-hearted bearded old man offered special training, but Rion flatly refused, declaring he would use this time to rest. Dun's eyes widened in surprise, his jaw dropping as he couldn't believe his ears. Hearing this battle maniac wanted to lounge around before a major fight, he casually took a sip of beer, declaring he would leave the guild's territory for a while to prepare for his own plans as soon as he had full membership status. Rion reassured the two seniors that he would return on time and would only drop by the Martin branch to gather news about the upcoming test. Old Dunn squinted, watching him with suspicion, vaguely realizing that this departure was the first move in Rion's profound scheme. Rion wiped his mouth with satisfaction after downing his beer, preparing for his next round of mischief with a smug expression. He raised his glass, cheering for them to drink until they dropped, completely ignoring the utterly helpless expressions of Sapphire and Uncle Duns. A shrill cry echoed from the tavern, warning them not to let this monster touch any more alcohol. Rion declared bluntly that these days of partying and revelry were about to become extinct, so he had to make the most of them. He explained to Duns that once he became a Rank 4 assassin, he would only be grinding missions relentlessly, with no time for rest. Therefore, Rion decided to pack his bag and go off on his own that very night before work tied him down. His solitary figure stood on the cliff, gazing out towards the desolate, wind-swept lands ahead. Rion named his destination the Darklands, a place whose very name reeked of death, meant only for daredevils. His eyes flashed with a malevolent green light as he thought of the interesting things awaiting him in that land of death. The rapid clatter of horse hooves echoed, shattering the stillness of the dark night on the deserted road. A fully armed cavalry escort was moving a luxurious carriage at high speed through the night. Leading the contingent was Kyle Daron, with his striking pink hair and the arrogant demeanor of a superior. Kyle Daron's eyes suddenly widened in surprise as he spotted a strange object audacious enough to block the convoy's path. He looked down and saw a small traveler sitting with knees drawn up by the deserted roadside, like a wounded animal. Rion, in a pathetic state, was sitting on the ground, playing the role of a lost, weak, and harmless wanderer, pitiful to behold. He pulled his hood lower to conceal his face and the sinister smile lurking beneath the fabric. Kyle Daron stopped his horse directly in front of the stranger and questioned his identity with an authoritative and suspicious tone. Rion looked up with feigned, teary eyes, employing a pity ploy to ask for a ride back to the village because of his aching leg. He continued to deeply portray the role of a poor victim, afraid of freezing to death on the road, to manipulate the opponent's sympathy. Kyle Daron scratched his head in annoyance, secretly judging that this kid had the audacity of the heavens to dare block his path in the middle of the night. Kyle Daron, riding his white warhorse, arrogantly barked at the audacious individual who dared to block the noble carriage's path. Beneath his hood, Rion smirked cunningly as his prey had taken the bait exactly as planned. He sat casually on the ground, calmly analyzing the horse's footsteps to expose that the convoy was in no hurry at all. Kyle Daron looked dumbfounded, not expecting this ragged kid to retort so sharply. Rion immediately switched to A-list actor mode, his eyes glistening with tears as he pleaded for pity for a poor child. Kyle Daron looked down with disdain, feeling as annoyed as if he had stepped in a high-class nuisance. Knock, knock. A knock echoed from inside the luxurious carriage, interrupting the act. A powerful voice commanded Kennel to throw the child into the carriage immediately. Kyle Daron spun around, vehemently protesting that he would never allow a stranger into his master's carriage. After some back-and-forth haggling, he conceded, suggesting they put the kid on a horse to be done with it. Rion grinned widely as he comfortably sat on the same horse as Kyle Daron, while the prince looked utterly bewildered. Kennel sneered teasingly that they looked quite a good match, making Kyle Daron gnash his teeth in frustration. Kyle Daron sullenly asked for his name, receiving the brief reply that he was Rion from Paynton, with an utterly innocent expression. The voice from inside the carriage reminded him that he was saved thanks to the kindness of the benevolent young lady within. Kyle Daron snorted coldly, lecturing the boy that he should be grateful for this fluke of luck. Rion smiled outwardly, but inwardly, he coldly asserted that this was a perfect plan, not some random luck. He had scouted the area and meticulously calculated the Rose family convoy's route even before their departure. The target was Lady Signton Rose, who was living in seclusion in the remote Fainstroy border region. After the sudden death of the family head, she was forced into exile in a distant land, which led to this journey. The escort guards were actually just household soldiers granted fake knight titles, pitying their master's unfortunate fate. Ryun smirked meaningfully as he thought about the Rose family's pathetic curtain call. The escort guard broke out in a cold sweat, firmly asserting that all this misfortune stemmed from the sermon name. Ryun stood thoughtfully in the room, realizing that the current investigation had hit a dead end with the family head's death. His gaze sharpened as he questioned the true extent of the Sermon family's involvement in this tangled mess. The mounted escort guards began whispering and gossiping about the baseless rumors they had overheard. As bloody memories of the assassination surfaced, Ryun feigned utter shock upon hearing that the Sermon family was falsely accused as the culprit. As night fell, the entire group decided to set up camp and rest in the secluded forest. Ryun huddled by the campfire with a harmless expression, while Kyle Daron and the guards were still discussing something. Kyle Daron looked at the dozing boy with disdain, not bothering to care about the presence of a weakling. Ryun sat casually behind the carriage, his face world-weary, but his mind meticulously planning his next moves. He shed his innocent facade, revealing cold, sharp green eyes as he pieced together all the information he had just gathered. The harsh truth was that the Rose family was merely a small shrimp crushed between the power struggle of two whales, Sermon and Patton. The eldest son of the Rose family, despite carrying rival blood, ironically became a knight serving the Sermon family. He died on a mission in the dark regions, and Sermon, wishing to repay the debt of gratitude, heavily funded the Rose family. It was this unexpected rise, thanks to the aid, that made other noble families envious and seek opportunities to backstab them. The opportunity arose when the head of the Rose family was suddenly assassinated with poisoned wine in his own home. Rumors spread like wildfire that Rose was an insider for Sermon, and the assassination was a brutal silencing blow to cover up tracks. The Rose side tried to protest loudly that Patton was the true mastermind, but the voice of the weak was utterly worthless at this moment. Having lost its leader and with its power collapsed, the remnants of the Rose family sadly boarded the exile carriage towards Daron. In the quiet of the night, Ryun realized that only those involved truly held the stark truth behind this tragedy. Kennel pondered deeply about the few remaining loyalists who dared to follow and protect Lady Rose. Sainton Rose was deep in an exhausted sleep on her arduous and humiliating journey of exile. Under the clear moonlight, Kennel stood guard outside the tent to ensure absolute safety for the entire group. Sainton Rose huddled up in her red dress, looking small and weak against the family's turmoil. Kennel shivered, recalling the sick, covetous gaze that the second-in-command of the Ayani family had directed at the young lady. He clearly determined that the true enemy now was not Sermon, but the brutal alliance between Patton and Ayani. The group gathered around the campfire, thanks to the powerful last-minute guarantee from the Sermon family. Rion ate heartily while listening to how the Sermon family had exhausted its resources to help the remnants of the Rose family. Kennel flicked a twig into the fire with a nonchalant expression, hiding his inner worries. In the guards' memories, they had once happily raised their glasses in toast to the Sermon family like brothers. A kind soldier scooped more soup for Rion, and the boy pretended to meekly accept the bowl of food. Rion chuckled inwardly, finding the intricate connections between these families quite interesting to exploit. The old soldier continued to chatter endlessly, unaware he was speaking with a monster disguised as a child. Rion feigned innocence, asking if it was all right to bring a child like him on this journey. The soldier laughed heartily, recounting old stories, forcing Rion to give a fake, awkward smile to maintain his disguise. Kennel interrupted the pointless conversation to reassure everyone and focus on the mission. He cast his gaze towards the carriage, feeling pity for Sainton Rose's dire situation and the heavy burden on her shoulders. Rion sipped his soup, his sharp eyes darting around, realizing the true crux of the problem lay with Sainton Rose herself. Kennel sat by the campfire, worried the new recruits didn't fully grasp the deadly danger of the upcoming events. The sinister specters of the Ayani and Patton families emerged, signaling they wouldn't stop at merely killing the Rose family head. The Ayani family appeared as a crazed bunch, especially the second son with his extensive assassination record. Sapphire wearily scrolled through the requests, despising that assassin's habit of only hunting the weak. Despite being known for chicken hunting, he protected himself meticulously with layers upon layers of guards. Rune sipped his soup while calculating, realizing that if that madman targeted Saint and Rose, he couldn't remain idle any longer. Under the cover of night, Rune quietly separated from the group, moving as silently as a ghost along the cliff face. He plunged into the abyss, activating a skill to land smoothly without a sound. Upon touching down, Rune sensed the tail pursuing him but decided to spare them to play a stalling game. Instead of expending effort to clear them out, he chose to set magical traps to slow the pursuer's advance. 2 bewildered guards blocked his path, wondering why the boy was covered in mud like a plowing buffalo. Rune scratched his head and gave an awkward laugh, fabricating a ridiculous yet fluent excuse about slipping and falling while relieving himself. He conveniently instructed the guards, telling the injured one to seek help and the other to rest. A dense network of magical traps had been activated underground, ready to welcome the uninvited guests. Returning to his bed, Rune feigned sleep, but in his mind, he had finalized his plan after gathering all necessary information. He considered his efforts in setting traps to protect them as payment for the hot soup he had earlier. Dawn broke over the mountain peaks, signaling that the time for parting had arrived. Kennel, on behalf of the entire group, thanked Rune for his companionship, completely unaware he had just traveled with a monster. Rune presented his cover as a traveling merchant to legitimize his departure from the group here. He showed off the mushrooms and medicines in his backpack, boasting about his trading plans in Dassam and Painton. It was time for them to go their separate ways. Rune bid farewell to the naive soldiers to continue his own journey. Kennel unexpectedly offered a vial of healing potion, conveying the young lady's wish to give it to the boy for self-defense. Saint and Rose quietly waved goodbye through the carriage window, her eyes holding a fleeting trace of fondness for her young benefactor. Kennel scratched his head awkwardly, thanking the boy on behalf of the entire group for the rare peaceful time they had experienced, thanks to his guidance. Rune held the potion vial, feigning surprise and delight at this unexpected farewell gift. He coldly rejected Kennel's offer of future assistance, stating firmly that no one should seek him out again. The escort guards began to whisper and chatter, praising their captain as gruff but inherently kind-hearted. Kennel's face flushed crimson with embarrassment. He turned and yelled at the gossiping guards to quickly get moving and out of his sight. Rune walked alone on the winding path, his footsteps crunching amidst the silent expanse of the desolate mountains. He held the potion vial up to the sunlight, a smirk clearly visible on his face as he assessed its quality. With a soft pop, Rune expertly uncorked the potion vial to enjoy the free gift. He tilted his head back and drained the liquid inside, the gulping sounds echoing refreshingly as if he were drinking a cool beverage. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, accompanied by the thunderous sound of hooves approaching from behind, shattering the peaceful atmosphere. Horse hooves pounded the ground, kicking up clouds of dust, signaling a terrifying danger rushing towards him at incredible speed. A cavalry troop galloped past Rune, the strong wind and dust whipping his cloak, making it flap as if it would tear apart. Rune turned back in surprise, his eyes clearly showing annoyance and wariness at almost being trampled by the strangers. He quickly analyzed the pursuing formation of 6 individuals charging like madmen, kicking up dust that obscured a corner of the sky. Among them were 2 mediocre mercenaries with unremarkable equipment, merely background figures for the spectacle. Next were 2 amateur swordsmen. Their grip on the reins and riding posture clearly showed their lack of skill. A mage rode alongside them, staff in hand, who would undoubtedly be the most troublesome opponent if a conflict arose. Finally, there was a mysterious figure, completely shrouded in a hood, yet the cruel aristocratic aura emanating from him was impossible to conceal. He threw back his hood, revealing a crazed face with sharp fangs. It was Garuta Ayani, the bloodthirsty second son of the assassin family. Garuta Ayani grinned maniacally as he rode past, while Rune glared back with clear displeasure. Rune pulled down his face covering, his sharp, cold gaze assessing the situation as the dust storm passed. The pursuing cavalry sped away, leaving a long, trailing dust cloud in the desolate canyon. Rune clicked his tongue in disappointment, realizing the enemy's skill level was too high, rendering his traps completely useless. He looked at the empty potion bottle in his hand, suddenly remembering he had accidentally drunk all of this expensive gift. Rune let out a meaningful haha laugh, a crazy plan beginning to form in his mind. He looked in the direction of the carriage, secretly admiring the fleeing young lady, who still had the presence of mind to worry about strangers. A grim vision appeared in Ryun's mind. The Rose family annihilated, and Lady Sainton Rose captured as a prisoner. A green aura erupted around Ryun, and he decided to act because this potion was worth an advance payment. A glowing green magic circle lit up beneath his feet. He calculated that chasing horses on foot was impossible. From the magic circle, Rune summoned a petite undead warrior that hovered in midair. He pointed forward imperiously, calling out the name of his main general, Kornak. Rune flew into the air with his guardian spirit, declaring this would be its first appearance. Rune's face split into two halves, one an innocent facade, the other his ruthless necromancer nature as he summoned Kornak. In the distance, Kennel's escort caravan was still moving slowly, unaware that death was approaching. Strange sounds and magical pressure echoed from behind, causing the ground to shake. Kennel, startled, turned back, cold sweat pouring down as he sensed the killing intent rushing towards them. He shouted an order to speed up, leaving the escort soldiers bewildered and unsure of what was happening. Kennel hurriedly approached the carriage, reassuring Lady Signton Rose to endure the violent shaking that was about to come. The entire cavalry whipped their horses into a gallop, the atmosphere becoming extremely tense, like a string about to snap. Kennel broke out in a cold sweat as he sensed the killing intent, while the escort soldier beside him remained bewildered, not understanding what was happening. He yelled in alarm that powerful mana users were in close pursuit from behind. Light shone into the carriage where the young lady was hiding, and a tense atmosphere enveloped the entire caravan. Kenil pointed forward, urging the entire group to accelerate to maximum speed towards the border that was right before their eyes. He ordered 2 escort soldiers to prioritize taking the young lady to flee across the border if the enemy caught up. Kennel firmly asserted that once they crossed the border, even the Ioni family wouldn't dare to act recklessly. He turned his horse back, deciding to make a big move and stay behind to block the rear, buying time for the entire group to escape. Despite being extremely worried, the escort soldiers still obeyed the order, promising to meet their commander safely on the other side of the border. Kennel flashed a confident smile to reassure his comrades, though he knew full well the situation was hanging by a thread. He told himself that even though his knightly skill was limited compared to the Ioni family, the honor of the Rose family would not allow him to retreat. The thunderous sound of hooves echoed as the pursuing cavalry, radiating killing intent, charged like a storm. The hooded leader of the pursuit team slightly frowned, seeing someone daring enough to stand in their way. Kennel swung his sword, creating a wave of air that struck the ground, and shouted loudly, demanding the enemy stop immediately. He yelled, questioning the enemy's identity and ordering them to retreat if they didn't want to face the consequences. Kennel glared threateningly, vowing to cut off the head of anyone who dared to disobey and continue to advance. The mysterious leader sneered with utter contempt at Kennel's weak threat. He repeated the phrase, "cut off the head," with a maniacal grin, revealing sharp fangs like a beast toying with its prey. The hooded leader scoffed, mocking Kennel as merely delusional about his strength due to the petty knight title he had just received. He pulled off his hood, revealing himself as Garuta Ayani, striking Kennel with extreme horror as he realized the true identity of this monster. Garuta Ayani sneered, ordering his subordinates that all must die, except for the Saintess. He gave a cold directive. They must capture the target alive before she could reach the borderline. The enemy cavalry thundered forward like a storm, causing the ground to shake violently beneath their hooves. Kennel roared and swung his sword, intending to block the enemy, but before he could do anything, he was preemptively struck. A massive explosion tore up the ground right where the poor pink-haired man stood, sending dust flying everywhere. The mage on horseback had just unleashed a fierce magical attack to intimidate the obstructionist. Kennel was blown away, spitting out blood as he realized his opponent was a second circle mage or higher, far beyond his capabilities. Garuta Ayani raised a finger, signaling to stop, yielding the stage to another knight to deal with the prey. A heavy, powerful footstep landed right in front of Kennel, who was kneeling and gasping for breath. Garuta Ayani smirked, announcing that this brat would die here anyway. Kennel's eyes widened in horror as he realized the enemy was none other than Commander Ciso of the Rose Knights. Ciso frankly admitted that he betrayed his knightly vows solely for money, with no deeper reason. The shameless former commander declared that since the Rose family had fallen, he had to look out for himself first. Ciso launched a powerful kick at his former comrade without mercy, initiating the fight. 2 swords clashed loudly, sparks flying between 2 generations of commanders, one loyal, one traitorous. Kennel was completely overwhelmed by the traitor's crushing power and cunning experience. Ciso roared madly that the world had changed and chivalry was now nothing but worthless trash. A lightning slash struck, making Kennel stagger, nearly perishing before Ciso's might. Despite Ciso's enticement to surrender and switch allegiances, Kennel spat blood, refusing with defiance, calling it nonsense. Ciso looked down at the defeated opponent with arrogance, coldly concluding that the young lady must have been captured, so it would end quickly. The traitor's blade pressed against Kennel's neck. He uttered a hollow apology before intending to send his former comrade on his way. The sword swung, tearing through the air at terrifying speed. Death seemed to have called the loyal knight's name. Boom! A surge of green energy exploded, deflecting the fatal attack, saving Keenel from certain defeat at the last moment. Siso's eyes widened in shock, his face changing color, unable to comprehend who dared to ruin his glorious moment. A colossal phantom enveloped Kennel, making the traitor roar, angrily demanding the identity of the obstruction. A petite female warrior spirit materialized within a green aura, exuding terrifying magical pressure that made the space tremble. Before he could compose himself, Siso was struck by an corrosive magic attack on his shoulder, making him grit his teeth in pain and fury. The undead female warrior glided like the wind, unleashing a barrage of green energy spears, relentlessly attacking the enemy. The destructive blows collided, creating green energy explosions that ravaged the surrounding ground. The entire battlefield violently shook under the pressure of the energy explosions, thick smoke and dust obscuring everyone's vision. Siso struggled to erect a mana shield to block the attacks, sweat pouring down as he realized the enemy's skills were monstrous. Thud. Although he had blocked it, the aftershock still made the traitor cough up blood, severe internal injuries causing him to stumble. Rune appeared with sharp, cold eyes, declaring this bloody intervention was the price to repay the earlier bowl of soup. A sword spun rapidly in mid-air, controlled by the invisible hand of the brilliant battlefield manipulator. Slash. Fresh blood splattered as Siso took a brutal cut from the flying sword, unable to react in time to its overwhelming speed. The carriage was shattered, the poor horses lay slumped in pools of blood, a desolate and tragic scene after the skirmish. Two escort guards stood frozen, panting as they watched the battle unfold, unable to believe their eyes due to extreme shock. They tremblingly uttered their acknowledgement of the reluctant savior's overwhelming power, completely subdued by the dominant display. Siso sat on horseback with a sneering expression, mocking the knights who were desperately trying to hold on. A faint voice echoed from inside the ruined carriage, causing the battlefield situation to temporarily quiet down. The carriage door swung open, and a pair of high heels stepped onto the ground with a rhythmic, noble sound. Saintine Rose stepped out, ignoring the faint pleas of the blood-soaked escort guard. The young lady swiftly drew a dagger hidden on her person, its metallic gleam flashing menacingly. She declared that she would agree to go with them in exchange for the lives of the others. Saintine Rose held the dagger to her own throat, gambling her life to coerce the enemy into complying with her demands. She was certain that their master needed her alive, not a soulless corpse. The sight of the blood-stained carriage was the clearest proof of the brutality the last bloodline of the Rose family was enduring. Her identity was confirmed, but Siso merely responded with a contemptuous sneer. He coldly pointed out that she was gravely misunderstanding her true worth. Siso asserted that until she set foot in Daeron, she was neither a noble nor anything of significance. Saintine Rose froze, cold sweat breaking out as she realized her trump card was utterly useless. He declared there was no reason to heed her words and swung his greatsword high. A brutal sword strike was unleashed, tearing through the air at terrifying speed, aimed at the target as a warning. The poor horse's head flew from its neck, blood gushing out like a bloody warning to the young lady. Saintine Rose's eyes widened completely, extreme fear seizing her mind as she witnessed the horrific scene. A mercenary suddenly rushed forward, restraining her from behind, mockingly threatening to teach her a lesson she'd never forget. The escort guard could only scream in despair as he watched his mistress fall into the hands of the butchers. Rose flinched violently, her face drained of color as she felt killing intent surge right beside her. A loud, sharp sound echoed as an unknown object landed with immense force, kicking up a cloud of dust. Rune descended from the sky like a deity, delivering a heaven-shattering kick directly to the face of the mercenary who was about to make a move. Fresh blood splattered into the air, causing Rose to turn back in stunned silence to look at her newly appeared benefactor. The unfortunate soldier was crushed under Rune's heel, only managing a desperate scream before lying motionless. His orange-hatted companion recoiled in panic, yelling to demand the identity of the one who dared to attack their side. Rune kept his foot on the enemy's head, calmly stating that he had come to settle the debt for the potion bottle with this overly weak opponent. He turned to propose that Rose use the potion bottle and a bowl of soup as a down payment to hire a Martin assassin on the spot. Rose was stunned to realize that her savior was a member of the renowned Martin Assassin Guild, identified by his distinctive attire. The mercenary leader angrily questioned why Martin would meddle in the Rose family's affairs. Rose's mind raced quickly. She guessed that if he was from Martin, he must belong to the direct lineage of Asan to possess such an aura. She hastily shouted the number 30 gold to finalize the protection contract immediately. Rune smirked meaningfully, praising the Rose young lady's quick grasp of the situation. However, He bluntly declared that the amount was still not enough for him to risk his life. He pointed his sword towards the orange-hatted soldier, saying that 30 gold was only enough to deal with this small fry in front of him. Rune listed a formidable array of enemies, including young Master Ani, the traitor Siso, and even a third circle mage, to force a higher price. The mercenary gnashed his teeth, furious at being treated like worthless trash. Rune stood blocking in front of Rose, coldly warning her to name a price quickly if she didn't want him to cancel the deal and leave. Rose understood that if he left, the exile plan would be abandoned, so she decided to go all in to protect her family's honor. Rune stood looming behind her, creating immense pressure that made Rose tremble, not daring to turn her head. Cold sweat streamed down the young lady's pale face as she was cornered. Rose screamed in despair, agreeing to offer everything in exchange for her life. Rune flashed a wild grin, his eyes glowing green, and sealed the protection deal immediately. The mercenary leader was enraged to see an assassin dare to openly show his face so brazenly. Rune drew a dagger enveloped in a green aura, sarcastically remarking that only the weak needed to hide their identities. He shot off like a gust of wind, boldly declaring the true class of a genuine assassin. A streak of green sword energy tore through space with terrifying speed. Before the mercenary could react, he was struck in the chest, and fresh blood splattered into the air. Rune landed coolly, asserting that he confidently showed his face because he never made mistakes. Rose froze completely, her eyes wide with astonishment at the overwhelming power of the young assassin. Rune excitedly declared that this was his first official contract with the Marton organization. The two escort soldiers gaped in shock upon hearing that the price to pay was the entire Rose family fortune. He clenched his fist, determined to build a reputation worthy of that enormous sum. Despite being injured, the mercenary still struggled to get up, straining his neck to argue back against Ryun's contemptuous words. He screamed frantically, asserting that they were not naive fools easily bullied. Rune turned back to look at him with eyes as sharp as knives, calmly repeating the word "we" with a hidden meaning. The mercenary swung his sword and charged, intending to deliver a finishing blow in his extreme rage. With just a single sharp sword strike, Rune finished him off in the blink of an eye. Rune flipped in midair, dodging the mercenary's sword strike as light as a feather. He landed gracefully, while his large opponent helplessly swung his sword at empty air. The leader yelled at his fallen comrade, ordering him to get up and continue the fight. Camille and Sainten Rose froze when they realized the killing intent emanating from Rune was indeed the caliber of a Martin assassin. The mercenaries launched a full-force collective attack, boldly declaring that Rune had made a mistake by taking this protection contract. They coordinated a continuous barrage of attacks that tore up the ground, swearing they would make him regret his foolish decision. Rune dodged the attacks as easily as taking a stroll, flashed a contemptuous smile, then uttered a provocative question. The system announced the activation of the skill, Body Domination, and Rune dashed forward with an explosive green aura. The body acceleration skill was further activated, transforming him into an unstoppable high-speed combat machine. He glided like a whirlwind, leaving the slow mercenaries trailing in his dust. Rune closed in face to face, causing the leader extreme confusion, unable to distinguish between illusion and reality. A panicked soldier frantically swung his sword wildly at the air, letting out a desperate scream of fear. The commander tried to calm his subordinates, yelling, demanding they not attack haphazardly, but to time their counterattack. Rune flashed a deathly smile, his eyes flashing with a green light, signaling that all their efforts were already too late. He moved with unimaginable speed, stepping on them as if playing with children. Ryun's sharp eyes locked onto his target, ready to unleash a fitting punishment. The bewildered soldier looked around frantically, having completely lost track of the opponent right within his own formation. The leader broke out in a cold sweat, panicking because he couldn't sense the mana flow and suspected it was dark magic. Rune suddenly appeared right behind the soldier, preparing to deliver a fatal blow to send him to his demise. The panicked mercenary shouted to his comrades not to swing their swords wildly, lest they cut each other in their fear. Rune appeared right in front of him, coldly announcing that everything was too late, as a series of debuffs like weakness and blindness had already been activated. The enemy was utterly terrified when he realized the opponent not only used curses, but also possessed the wicked skills of a necromancer. Desperate screams echoed as green energy blades tore through the enemy formation, fresh blood splattering everywhere. Rune glided like a whirlwind, completely outplaying the petty soldiers who were falling to the ground like cut straw before his overwhelming power. He looked down at the defeated foes with sharp, cold eyes, uttering a judgment that forced them to experience the pain the Rose family had endured. The scene shifted to the carriage, where the war horses, though splattered with blood, still stood firm after the fierce battle. Kennel rushed back to the carriage with a radiant face, calling out loudly to his lady to report her safety. Sainton Rose stepped out with tear-filled eyes, bursting into happiness and laughing through her tears for still being alive. Rune stood observing from a distance, his right eye glowing green, a relieved yet meaningful smile on his face. Kennel turned to check on his two subordinates, Gaian and Chaku, to ensure they were all right after the sweep. The two bewildered soldiers, sweating profusely, asked if Captain Kennel had single-handedly dealt with all the pursuers. Kennel blushed furiously, scolding his subordinates for their grave misunderstanding and misplaced flattery. He quickly explained and pointed towards Rune, introducing him as a mysterious mage who had suddenly appeared to help. Rune stood there with an incredibly cool demeanor, beside him a petite guardian spirit emitting a ghostly green aura. Kennel enthusiastically recounted his benefactor's achievements, from dealing with the traitor to capturing the fierce Garuda alive. Ryun's guardian spirit was holding the battered Garuda by the neck like a sack of trash, demonstrating the complete disparity in their power levels. Kennel curiously looked towards the small spirit, and wondered if that entity was also a part of his benefactor's power. Ryun didn't say much. He raised his hand, activating a brilliant green magic circle to prepare for the next step. An enemy was sent flying into the air by Ryun's green magic, then slammed hard onto the ground, spitting blood on the spot. Kyle Daron stared at Rune with a suspicious expression, asking if he was Leon, as rumored. Hearing Sainton Rose confirm Rune was an assassin from Marton, Kyle Daron's jaw dropped in shock, and cold sweat began to pour down. A horrifying scene flashed through Kyle Daron's mind, of Rune slaughtering the entire enemy formation with blood splattered everywhere. He shivered, realizing why the enemy mage had been eliminated so swiftly before such overwhelming power. Ciso clutched one side of his blood-soaked face, muttering the name Martin in utter despair and terror. The old man Ciso screamed frantically, promising to pay double, then triple the bounty to beg Rune for his life. Sainton Rose looked at the traitor with sharp, cold eyes, ruthlessly declaring that he had been painfully deceived. Rune clicked his tongue in disdain at the old man's clamor. His left eye flashed with a deadly green light, signaling the end. A sharp green magical current swept through, shredding Ciso's body, and causing fresh blood to gush out profusely. Rune coldly stepped over Ciso's corpse, leaving the messy aftermath behind in front of everyone's eyes. He turned back with a contemptuous glance, intimidating the others for daring to compare him to low-tier assassins. Rune leaned close to Sainton Rose, whispering meaningfully to remind her of the enormous reward she had promised. Sainton Rose broke out in a cold sweat but still had to play along, affirming that Martin would not tolerate anyone who dared to default on their payment. A gigantic, eerie phantom appeared behind Rune. He smiled brightly, but his words reeked of threats regarding the Assassin's Guild's rules. Sainton Rose tremblingly nodded repeatedly, confirming that she fully understood the dire consequences if she dared to trifle with this organization. Rune swiftly changed his tune, smiling kindly and saying that he wasn't demanding payment immediately. He admitted he was well aware of the Rose family's current dire financial situation and would therefore make some allowances. Rune finalized the deal by requesting her to officially entrust 30 gold to Martin, while the unspoken debt would be settled between the two of them later. He coldly ordered the entire group to pull themselves together and leave immediately, firmly asserting that no one would dare to pursue them anymore. Rune declared he would take care of cleaning up the corpses, instructing them to blame bandits if questioned by border guards. The two escort soldiers looked at each other, breaking out in a cold sweat, filled with utmost admiration for his decisive and utterly professional work ethic. Kennel and his subordinates unanimously obeyed, secretly admitting in their hearts that this man handled matters too perfectly, truly living up to the saying, "You get what you pay for." Seeing his benefactor turn and leave, Kennel hastily called out his alias to say a final word, but was stopped. Rune raised a finger to his lips in a mysterious gesture for silence, gave an arrogant smile, then activated his transformation skill. He vanished into thin air with a ghostly green smoke, performing his stealth technique right before everyone's eyes. Ryun's entire form completely evaporated into nothingness, leaving the bewildered group staring into the empty space. Keneal and Sainton Rose were dumbfounded, sweating profusely, unable to believe he could disappear without a trace so quickly. Only flickering green magical remnants remained on the ground, the sole proof of the bizarre assassin Martin's presence. Kennel frowned in thought, then turned to tell the young lady that this man was not simply an ordinary assassin as he claimed. He recalled the image of that peculiar undead from earlier, and began to analyze Ryun's true abilities more deeply. Kennel asserted that what Rune summoned completely surpassed the level of ordinary, mindless undead. Kennel's face hardened as he realized the horrifying anomaly when piecing together the moment that monster appeared. Though it was only a fleeting glimpse, Keneal would stake his life that that undead possessed intelligence and could speak human language. The image of the eerie, bloodthirsty smile of the female undead warrior appeared vividly, haunting Kennel's mind. He shivered, remembering how Rune dispatched both the traitor Ciso and the mage, almost simultaneously, with terrifying speed. Kennel pondered, believing that someone who could control such high-level undead and possess such overwhelming power must surely have an incredible background. He concluded that Rune was highly likely to be a disciple of Veda, the legendary necromancer from the legends whose name everyone dreaded. The image of Veda, the legendary necromancer, appeared in their minds like a final boss ready to destroy the entire world. Kennel broke out in a cold sweat as he put forth the insane hypothesis that their benefactor might be the true disciple of the monster Veda. That forbidden name made Kennel and the escort guards freeze, realizing they had just been saved by an evil yet overwhelmingly powerful force. Sainton Rose's eyes widened in horror. The name Veda was like a harsh slap of reality, forcing her to reevaluate everything. She recalled the image of the mysterious Lord Leon, pieced together the clues, and shivered at his true identity. Kennel analyzed the tactics, asserting that the undead summoned by Leon was on an entirely different level compared to ordinary trash monsters. He emphasized to his comrades that if the rumor of Leon being Veda's disciple got out, the entire kingdom would be violently shaken. Sainton Rose clasped her hands tightly to her chest, her gaze wavering as she had to make a life-or-death decision for her family. She immediately switched to Queen mode, turning back to issue an absolute command for everyone to keep silent about what they had just witnessed. Rose asserted in a low voice that she wasn't trying to hide the enemy's death, but rather controlling the flow of information for maximum advantage. Garuta Ayani lay sprawled on the ground, tied up like a pig awaiting slaughter, covered in blood. Kennel still naively tried to explain that Leon was just a kind assassin working for passion and a bowl of soup, not fully grasping the gravity of the situation. Sainton Rose cut him off, explaining that if Leon truly inherited Veda's legacy, he was a living nuclear weapon. Her gaze was as sharp as a razor, concluding with the most important command, to absolutely conceal all information about Lord Leon. Kennel stared at his lady, realizing she had completely transformed from her previous image as a desperate exile. He clearly saw the burning determination in her eyes, devoid of any fear from a defeated person who had lost everything. Sainten Rose kindly inquired about Kennel's condition, confirming if her vice commander still had enough strength to drag himself to complete the mission. She ordered him to return to Paynton immediately to send an official assassination request to the Martin Guild, legitimizing everything. Rose pointed at Garuta's half-dead body, instructing them to stage the scene as if he had been assassinated by another force. With eyes burning with ambition, Sainton Rose swore to use this opportunity to restore the Rose family and reclaim their lost status. The escort captain and Kennel breathed a sigh of relief, their faces smudged, but their eyes had regained their spirit after receiving the orders. Kennel nodded firmly, with a confident smile on his lips, ready to rush back to Paynton to carry out the mission without hesitation. As everyone prepared, a voice echoed from the emerald green smoke, announcing that magic would be used to repair the shattered carriage. Rune sat huddled in the shadows, his hand glowing with an eerie blue light as he manipulated mana to reinforce the means of transport. The necromancer's green eyes gleamed under his hood. He was re-evaluating Sainton Rose's true nature. In his eyes now, she was not a fragile flower but a rose full of sharp thorns, ready to pierce anyone who dared to touch her. Ryun's memories drifted back to the past, beginning to recount the reason why dark magic became a taboo on this continent. That was the era of the Black and White War, when darkness enveloped the land and plunged everything into chaos. Everything began when the crazed dark mages, wearing plague doctor masks, simultaneously rose up across the continent of Drea. These fanatics were obsessed with summoning the Demon King. They massacred civilians to use fresh blood as sacrifices for their rituals. Not stopping there, they occupied the small kingdom of Raiko in the south and turned it into a living hell. Their ambition was to drag the entire demon realm down to the mortal world, opening a gate for evil entities to invade the world. War erupted everywhere. Demons and their minions engulfed the entire continent in a sea of fire and death. In that moment of despair, one who wielded the power of death was revered by people as a living saint. Veda, the legendary necromancer, rode upon a skeletal steed, leading an army of those willing to serve him even in death. The power of the Undead Legion under Veda's command was on an entirely different level, sweeping away every enemy in its path. With overwhelming power, Veda crushed the Dark Mages and their demonic hordes, ending the bloody war. After the victory, he refused all treasures and titles offered by the kingdoms, then vanished like a gust of wind. Back in reality, Ryun smirked triumphantly, realizing that summoning Kornak was the right move to test Rose's spirit. Witnessing the young lady's composure and leadership qualities, Ryun turned and walked away, secretly planning for his return to Dairon. Rune leaned against Sainton Rose in his mind, determining that he would have to get entangled with and save this troublesome lady in the future. He took his own wanted poster and tore it to shreds, determined to use this scandalous incident to polish Leon's reputation. Although the Rose family currently had nothing significant left, Sainton Rose's resilient gaze proved she was a potential seed. Rune snapped his fingers, activating a green teleportation spell, leaving a haughty promise to meet again before vanishing. He appeared on a perilous rocky peak, letting out a long breath after completing the journey. After half a day's journey from Dasong village, Ryun's solitary figure finally approached the required location. Before him was a colossal pit, emitting an eerie blue light. The destination of his hunt lay right at his feet. Ryun confirmed that the current location was Floor 12, the beginning of the perilous dark zone. Chilling drafts and eerie sounds echoed from the abyss below, signaling an entirely different world. The blue light from the bottom of the abyss seeped through the sheer rock walls, creating a scene both majestic and deadly. He stood on the edge of the abyss, looking down into the bottomless depths where sunlight had completely surrendered. Even though it lay deep underground, a strange light source still existed here, enough for the hunter to observe his prey. However, the darkness here was so dense that it lurked, ready to swallow every faint ray of light and engulf the faint-hearted. From within the pitch-black night, the monster's glowing golden eyes began to appear, craving the fresh blood of the intruder. This was the border of the Drea continent, a colossal labyrinth that had once caused countless lost souls to never find their way back. The structure of this place was divided into many floors. From floor 1 to 6 remained an unexplored mystery, while floors 7 to 12 had already been explored. The rule here was that the higher the floor number, the closer it was to the surface, and the weaker the monsters were, with swarms of petty goblins gathering densely. A foolish goblin rushed out from the shadows, letting out a piercing shriek, intending to ambush the outsider. Ryun gently swung his hand, and a green wind blade sliced the monster and its surrounding minions in half as if cutting weeds. Recalling the knowledge he had read in the Sermon family library, he smirked, asserting that this was the most ideal farming spot for leveling up. Instead of roaming across the Drea continent to hunt scattered monsters, Ryun affirmed that the mindset of a professional grinder was to find densely concentrated monster nests. The map showed this area had a monster density as thick as a wedge, truly a paradise for bloodthirsty individuals seeking high-speed leveling. Ryun smirked triumphantly upon finding the perfect farming spot. His hand emitted a green aura, ready to turn this place into a slaughterhouse. In this eerie dark zone, the shattered compass proved that all ordinary navigation tools were useless scrap. Only mana perception was the true way. The system's ding-ding sound rang out, signaling an increase in experience, confirming that the slaughter here brought immediate, tangible benefits. Ryun's green eyes flashed with a cold gaze. He assessed that this floor 12, though merely a playground for novices, had an extremely intricate labyrinthine terrain. A colossal green magic circle erupted beneath his feet. Ryun decided to unleash all his necromancer skills, which he had to keep secret for so long. His smile twisted into an evil grimace as the Raise Dead spell was uttered, marking the birth of an army of the dead. The goblins that had just fallen were immediately forced back up, their bodies contorting in an eerie green light, becoming soulless puppets. A lantern-wielding undead appeared. Though it was merely a low-tier creation made from goblin corpses, Ryun clicked his tongue, thinking that using it as cannon fodder was still perfectly fine. The system announced that the Death's Hand skill had activated, directly injecting dark power into the bony disciples he had just summoned. Ryun stood behind the screaming undead, explaining that these enhanced corpses would be tougher and last much longer than normal. He raised a finger in satisfaction, nodding in approval at the deadly artwork just created from the pile of scraps. Ryun spread his magic-infused hand, asserting that in a place overflowing with monster corpses like this, the Death's Hand skill was like a fish in water, free to be spammed endlessly. He excitedly asked the monsters if they wanted to help him relieve stress, while behind him, an entire army of pale green undead hungrily awaited orders. The gloomy cave scene suddenly became a bloody arena, where living goblins were torn apart by their own deceased kin. Desperate screams echoed everywhere as the weak monsters were completely overwhelmed by the power and numbers of the army of corpses. Ryun perched on a rock outcrop, observing the battle like a king, asserting that this floor 12 held no threats capable of challenging him. When the number of his disciples reached 30, he coldly commanded Fall to test his absolute control over the puppets. The entire undead horde collapsed to the ground with a thud. Ryun sighed, realizing the problem wasn't their spirit, but the meager amount of mana insufficient to sustain these puppets. Ryun clenched his fist with determination, asserting that his purpose in coming to this dead land was to level up and absorb experience. But first, he needed to recharge his depleted mana reserves by hunting down this floor's guardian. The Adon area boss appeared, looking incredibly cool. A colossal minotaur monster wielding a massive battle axe. Ryun's eyes blazed with green fire, locking onto that massive boss with the intention of making short work of it. The gloomy canyon scene was eerily silent, a place about to become the grave of the unfortunate monsters. Ryun panted, his face drenched in sweat after a continuous chain of skill-spamming actions. He stood amidst mountains of piled-up corpses, roughly estimating he had sent several hundred to their demise. The system announced the Death's Hand skill had leveled up. He wiped sweat from his brow, giving a faint smile because monsters were spawning in overwhelming numbers. He remarked that even in Adon, it was rare to find a farming spot where the monster density was so thick, and the respawn rate so incredibly fast. It felt as if dozens of dungeons had been crushed and mixed together, vomiting out a chaotic mess of monsters of all kinds. A goblin corpse that had just fallen began to vanish into nothingness before his very eyes. A purple aura enveloped the corpse, activating a characteristic super-fast regeneration mechanism, turning them into immortal meat shields. Ryun muttered, comparing this formidable resurrection mechanism to the term regeneration he had known on the Drea continent. Unlike the monsters in Drea that could form teams or communicate, these monsters of the Dark Zone were merely soulless killing machines. They were born only to be slaughtered, truly the most perfect training dummies, genuine and invaluable for him. Ryun brushed aside the cumbersome theories, deciding not to waste any more brain cells thinking, but to focus on grinding. He meditated peacefully amidst the battlefield to recover, absorbing a full 3 mana stat points from the system with ease. Riding on the wave of excitement, he focused his power to enhance the skills of his small phantom disciple within the magic circle. The Rise skill leveled up, bringing forth a squad of goblins and pale green skeletons emerging from the ground to protect their master. All auxiliary skills were also buffed to the max. Ryun declared that he had squeezed everything he could from this leveling system. The system chimed with good news. Ryun obtained a goblin shaman's finger, immediately increasing his mana by 1 point, while his small subordinate grinned widely. Ryun's eyes widened in surprise. The green aura surrounding him pulsed as he discovered an interesting mechanism. His special undead unit was leveling up rapidly. Truly, a favored minion with buffs was different. He covered his mouth, chuckling with delight, realizing that raising a formidable monster like Kornak was far more profitable than summoning a pile of trash. Though rare goods were hard to find, Ryun was confident he had grasped the trick to create a similarly overpowered monster. He activated his subspace skill, pulling out several corpses meticulously wrapped like mummies from the Dark Zone. Ryun planned to return the battered corpse of Guruta Ayani to the Assassin Guild to avoid future trouble. But for others, like the traitor Siso, he decided to keep them as sacrificial material for his experiment. The subspace skill was truly the perfect freezer to preserve these fresh corpses in the corpse vault. Ryun wore a sinister smile and began activating the magic array to perform his ambitious soul surgery. The soul extraction skill was activated. A surge of green energy erupted, enveloping the tightly bound corpses. His goal was to create a fighting machine capable enough to solo a floor guardian. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the colossal monster sat grandly, gnawing on a human arm as if it were a snack. Its breath exhaled white smoke. Its purple eyes glowed with a crazed bloodlust, making the surrounding air thick and heavy. Returning to Ryun, the extraction process was entering its climax with dazzling green light streams shooting out in all directions. The reputation of Floor Guardian 12 was no joke. It was a proven terror. It often appeared in the weakest parts of the Dark Zone, spreading nightmares to anyone who dared to venture there. Ryun stood facing the monster, calmly identifying it as a special orc from the Sermon region. The monster let out an earth-shattering roar, its hideous face living up to its title, the Human Slayer. The system panel appeared, confirming it was a level 23 berserk giant orc, a true boss that even Ryun had to acknowledge its oppressive power. A series of debuff notifications appeared, but Ryun remained unfazed, resisting them with his green energy flow method. The Human Slayer launched a lightning-fast opening strike, but Ryun gracefully retreated, declaring he had prepared its toys thoroughly. He glided like the wind through the ruined terrain, judging this place to be nothing short of a death maze for the boss. Ryun activated a magic array, summoning the most crucial element to outplay this sluggish monster: mobility. A zombie wolf, glowing with green flames, burst forth. This was the mount of the orc chieftain he had killed and reanimated. Ryun mounted the wolf, smirking as he affirmed that the short duration was more than enough to send the boss to its demise. The orc looked pitifully bewildered, not understanding what the hell had just happened as a streak of green light flashed past its face. Ryun skillfully maneuvered the wolf through the rock crevices, admitting that this monster would truly be a nightmare without a hunting party. The monster let out a terrifying roar, its eyes blazing with killing intent, as it saw its prey circling like a fly. It swung its spear, smashing the ground. But Rune had calculated that scattering mana everywhere would only make it more enraged and lose control. The more enraged it became, the more openings it revealed. Rune circled on the wolf, waiting for the opportune moment to deliver the finishing blow. Spotting a blind spot appear, Rune charged straight into the monster's vital point at an incredible speed. He leaped into the air, his hands forming a beautiful blue magic circle, in preparation for an attack. A sharp, resounding impact echoed as the magic attack struck the orc directly, making it stagger. Rune landed and clicked his tongue in disdain, complaining the wound was too shallow because his assassin level was still too low. Without a moment's hesitation, he followed up with another skill, his blade enveloped in a surge of deadly energy. The sword pierced the monster's flesh, activating the wound aggravation effect, causing blood to gush out profusely. The orc shrieked miserably as its wound was torn open, blood spurting like a fountain, impossible to stop. Streams of dark purple cursed energy began corroding its colossal body, causing it extreme agony. Rune looked down with the cold gaze of death, commanding the monster to stop struggling and obediently die. The monster refused to lie still and accept defeat. Instead, it erupted with a fierce aura, its entire body enveloped in a surge of crazed purple energy. Rune broke out in a cold sweat, realizing this creature had just activated its berserk state, a skill that blocked pain in exchange for destructive power. As expected, the orc swung its weapon, creating a terrifying shockwave. Rune fully understood that, confronting it directly now, would be a foolish move. He smirked confidently, raising his hand to activate the Raise Dead skill to call his crew to entertain the guest. Countless glowing green magic circles appeared. Bony arms began to emerge from the ground, answering the call. An entire legion of goblin undead rose from the underworld, howling wildly, ready to tear apart their enemies at their master's command. The enraged orc roared, shaking the heavens and earth, emitting an overwhelming killing intent upon seeing the small fry dare to block its path. Rune summoned 2 more tightly bandaged corpses, declaring that now it truly felt like a proper boss hunt. He recalled his failure when using the corpses of the Ani group to create special undead like Kornak. But this time he had a different plan. Instead of creating new soldiers, Rune decided to use the undead enhancement method to buff his subordinates' power to a new level. The 2 desiccated corpses began to be crushed and dissolved into the magic circle, serving as ingredients for the sacrificial ritual. The soul sacrifice skill was activated, and bursts of green energy connected and enveloped the entire skeletal legion. The system announced he had burned the night soul, temporarily transferring its combat skills to his subordinates. Not stopping there, a malevolent female mage ghost with a purple aura was also summoned from the void. The mage soul continued to be burned, insanely boosting the magical power of the eager undead army. Rune clenched his fists in excitement, as Kornak not only grew permanently stronger, but also awakened his combat knowledge from when he was alive. Standing between the 2 guardian souls and the mighty undead legion, Rune arrogantly ordered Kornak to begin the slaughter. The orc, even in its berserk state, had to growl cautiously at the terrifying pressure from the army before it. Rune's face revealed a crazed and bloodthirsty expression, his eyes gleaming with the killing intent of a true predator. He shouted, ordering the prey to be finished off. And the ghost behind him immediately charged forward with a deadly smile to send the boss to its demise. The orc roared in fury, as Rune's skeletal subordinates swarmed and tore at it like ants. The weak skeletons continuously rushed in suicidally, using their numbers to compensate for their poor quality. A harsh clanging sound echoed as the boss swung its weapon, sweeping away the minions and crushing them into green fragments. But these subordinates did not die in vain. Their corpses exploded, spraying poison directly onto the boss's face, leaving it dazed. Rune observed the results, explaining with satisfaction that when the undead die, they explode, dealing extremely potent poison damage. The commander's eye skill activated, and he smirked, praising the incredible resilience of the Human Slayer title, which was still holding on. Holding Kornak's card, Rune coldly declared that the undead were merely expendable assets, to be discarded without regret once used. Just as calculated, the poison had eroded its stamina, causing the monster's rage state to visibly weaken. The golden moment had arrived. Rune clenched his fists in excitement, ordering his main trump card, Kornak, to finish the game. Kornak roared with a thunderous sound, malevolent green energy surging from its eye sockets and mouth, preparing to unleash its attack. It coughed up a pool of black blood, releasing all the power it had suppressed for so long to unleash concentrated damage. Above, the mage soul began to gesture, drawing powerful, fiery, magic circles. The boss looked up at the sky, its eyes wide with horror, as it saw the gigantic magic array locking onto it. The magic circle spun violently, accumulating scorching fire energy, preparing to descend upon the enemy's head. A colossal firestorm formed in the air, its heat making the surrounding space feel as if it would evaporate. The mage soul smiled with satisfied killing intent, pouring all its power into the impending destructive blow. Rune pointed forward, his sharp eyes commanding to unleash all firepower upon the dying prey. Receiving her master's command, the ghostly female mage unleashed the entire firestorm upon the enemy's head without hesitation. The pillar of fire spiraled directly to the ground with destructive power, creating immense pressure that crushed the monster beneath. The boss shrieked miserably in despair as it was roasted by the infernal flames, officially perishing. The female mage's soul smiled with arrogance and satisfaction amidst the sea of flames, savoring the destructive outcome it had just created. The shattered spear lay abandoned in a pool of blood, a testament to Ryun's absolute dominance over his enemy. The colossal orc boss was now just a charred pile of flesh, kneeling, helplessly watching Ryun and his subordinates surround it. The one who was once a terror now knelt miserably, its entire body engulfed in flames before its future master. It coughed weakly, fresh blood gushing from its mouth, its eyes glazed over, unable to comprehend what had just happened to its power. Ryun coldly walked forward with his subordinates, uttering sarcastic praise that it deserved the title, the Human Slayer, and the role of a guardian. Not letting the prey linger, he raised his hand and delivered another firebolt directly to its face to quickly send it to its demise. After the cleanup, Ryun recalled the skeletal minions and goblins back into the void to conserve mana. The female mage's soul also gradually faded into nothingness after brilliantly completing its map-clearing mission. The monster let out a final shriek of extreme agony as the flames consumed its last vestiges of life. Ryun activated a brilliant green magic array, declaring that victory was firmly in his grasp. The Death's Hand skill was activated, and a gigantic blue energy hand appeared from the void. The ghostly hand firmly grasped the boss's head. The system announced that this skill had just been upgraded to a new level through practical combat. It turned out to be the Life Drain technique, a signature skill of high-level Undead, allowing Ryun to recover directly from the enemy's corpse. Notifications continuously popped up. Ryun's health and mana were fully replenished by draining the life force of the Human Slayer boss. The energy hand tightened its grip, crushing the enemy's head amidst the crackling sound of blue magic power. The notification of successfully defeating the Human Slayer appeared, and the boss exploded into thousands of beautiful purple light fragments. Ryun leveled up immediately, but more importantly, the system suggested the possibility of extracting this boss's soul thanks to his phantom ability. He stared in surprise, because he hadn't expected to be able to extract the soul of a renowned boss in this area, which was supposedly devoid of souls. The success rate was 57%, a number more than sufficient for a necromancer player like Ryun to go all out and try his luck. Ryun smirked confidently, activating the soul extraction skill on the recently fallen boss, his eyes glowing with magical power. A stream of dark purple energy in the shape of a bull's head was forcibly pulled from the corpse by Ryun's magical hand, accompanied by a chilling, wind-tearing sound. The soul of the Human Slayer screamed in despair as it was bound by necromancy's power and completely dragged out of its decaying body. The system reported the good news of a successful extraction, making Ryun groan with delight, but immediately after, he stared in surprise at a strange phenomenon. The boss's soul materialized with a gigantic size, exuding terrifying pressure and a blazing purple aura, causing the space to violently tremble. Ryun frowned in confusion, seeing the boss's charred corpse still lying there prominently, instead of disappearing as usual. According to game rules, corpses should vanish so the boss could respawn for other players to farm, but this one remained stubbornly there. Meanwhile, a squad of knights in red cloaks were concerned that the large commotion would attract the attention of the Dark Zone's guards. The heavily armed knights strode deeper into the cave area, with tense expressions amidst the clanking of their armor. The brown-haired female captain signaled the entire team to move towards the source of the tremors, with an extremely vigilant expression. The entire formation cautiously advanced into the boss's lair, a place filled with killing intent and shrouded in darkness. The female captain's eyes widened and she broke into a cold sweat, unable to hide her astonishment at the scene unfolding before her. The terrible destruction marks all around indicated that an earth-shattering battle had just taken place here, and it was no laughing matter. She was stunned, wondering if the rumors of the Human Slayer's defeat were true as she gazed at the ruins. Looking at the scene, the knights speculated that at least 30 elite masters and powerful mages must have been involved to accomplish this. The female captain remained skeptical, as there was no such formidable party registered to enter this area. She broke into a sweat as she analyzed the slashes, realizing these were calculated strikes from professionals, not random attacks. A knight exclaimed in horror, firmly asserting that this was the work of humans, not monsters tearing each other apart. The defeat of the human slayer boss was undeniable. Its gigantic corpse lying there was ironclad proof. The female captain immediately ordered the area sealed off to prevent the monsters of the 12th floor from rioting due to the loss of their overseer. Kyle Daron wondered, seeing Jan deep in thought amidst the battlefield, but the bearded knight merely brushed off the matter. Jan recalled an old injury on his hand, and reminded himself not to be careless or overexert himself to the point of no return in this crucial mission. He carefully observed the surrounding destruction marks, asserting that these were not traces of an ordinary hunt, but something formidable. Jan's eyes lit up with excitement, realizing this was the private signal that Rune had intentionally left for him. The knight clenched his fist with determination. The moment for him to fulfill his assigned mission had truly arrived. Rune saw the light from the teleportation gate ahead, signaling that the exit was now within sight. The rustling leaves welcomed him as he stepped onto the 11th floor, a lush green space completely contrasting the outside. Rune was astonished by the peaceful lake, remarking that this place was a world apart from the desolate ruins on the 12th floor. He strode deeper into the forest to find a secluded spot, certain that this distance was safe enough to proceed. Rune activated the corpse vault skill, opening the corpse storage to stash the gigantic spoils he had just acquired. A surge of dark purple energy erupted from the ground, forming a ghostly spatial gate that devoured everything. The soul of the human slayer appeared towering. Rune wondered why the corpse remained intact instead of vanishing and respawning as usual. He stared at his hand, realizing there was still another difficult problem that needed to be dealt with regarding this corpse. The system panel appeared, listing a series of quest lines from Vengeance, Assassin, to Necromancer. Rune recalled the timelines. The first questline opened when he defeated Ak. The second opened when he set foot in Marton's territory. A brand new notification appeared, marking the unlocking of the Path of Souls questline. Rune intently read the notification, confirming that this questline was activated immediately after he defeated the human slayer. Suddenly, the system reported an error, announcing that the two paths of Necromancer and Soul were being forcibly merged into one, which startled him. Rune was startled when he saw the words main quest appear, signaling that Veda's legacy had officially begun. A barrage of notification windows appeared, forcing the quest merger, making Rune exclaim in bewildered astonishment. The system unexpectedly announced Veda's legacy had officially started with an extremely dark and sinister interface. Rune's eyes widened in surprise, seeing the Path of Vengeance forcibly converted into a main quest with the objective of rebuilding the Sermon family. Still reeling from shock, he then received a request to advance to Assassin, rank 4 from the Path of the Assassin. Everything came crashing down like a storm. He realized that the formerly useless system was now finally showing its true potential, operating smoothly, just like when he reigned supreme in Adon. The world quest clearly appeared, presenting a crazy demand to raise the human slayer's corpse as an undead. Rune stared at the charred corpse, suspecting a mysterious connection between the title of human slayer and Veda. He shivered, recalling that world quests were rare occurrences, only appearing when he killed a god in his previous life. Not wanting to speculate, he decided to activate the magic circle to complete the quest and find the answer immediately. Rune loudly commanded, "Arise!" covering the monster's corpse with a familiar green magic circle. He suddenly froze, exclaiming in surprise upon seeing an unusual magical reaction from the corpse. The gigantic corpse was lifted into the air, surrounded by an extremely sinister and complex dark purple magic array. The monster's face began to transform, as necromantic energy surged violently within every piece of its dead flesh. A colossal purple energy pillar erupted, tearing through space and creating terrifying pressure all around. Rune gritted his teeth, enduring, as he realized in horror that his mana reserves were being completely drained like a breached dam. The energy storm continued to rage furiously, completely obscuring the view into the eye of the storm. From within the thick purple smoke, a gigantic armored skeletal figure began to emerge with immense power. Heavy footsteps crushed the ground, creating tremors that sent shivers down one's spine. The berserker skeleton stepped out in dazzling pink-purple armor, exuding an overwhelming aura that completely surpassed its living form. Its deep-set eye sockets glowed with purple soul fire, ready to crush any foe daring to obstruct its master. Rune was astonished to have summoned a berserker skeleton instead of a zombie. While the system reported the mission was perfectly completed, Rune grimaced, looking at the card in his hand, complaining about the terrifying mana consumption of the newly summoned entity. Though its effectiveness was undeniable, the forest was shrouded in silent night, glowing with mysterious blue magical lights. full of mystery and death. Packs of red-eyed black wolf monsters charged out from the shadows, howling madly, intending to tear apart the intruder who dared to trespass into their territory. The berserker skeleton swung its gigantic greatsword, sweeping away in one strike the minions who dared to block its master's path. The sound of bones clashing and flesh splattering as the heavy blade crushed the dark monsters into pulp. Rune perched on a tree branch, observing, satisfied that, though not yet perfected, this subordinate was more than capable of clearing out the petty monsters. He gulped down a recovery potion while muttering calculations. The price for this overwhelming power was mana plummeting uncontrollably. The berserker skeleton charged into the fray like a tank, proving its status as a special entity far superior to ordinary undead. The energy core on the chest of the purple armor glowed brightly, continuously consuming mana as if drinking water to sustain its high-intensity operations. Rune coordinated his tactics, allowing the mage soul to unleash long-range magic attacks, supporting the skeletal giant sweeping through the front lines. On the front lines, the berserker skeleton acted as both a tank, absorbing blows, and a sweeping fighter, handling all types of close combat. Watching his two subordinates rampage below, Rune suddenly recalled the days of forming hunting parties and grinding relentlessly in the old world of Adon. System notifications rang out continuously. His Death's Hand skill level and his mana stats soared after the massacre. Rune smirked with calculation, his eyes flashing with a green light as he remembered the true purpose of this journey was not merely to level up. He clasped his hands, activating the blue earth tempering method, circulating a stream of green energy to envelop his entire body to begin searching. A colossal magical network unfurled from Rune, sweeping through every inch of the forest like an incredibly powerful living radar. Rune frowned in disappointment as the feedback signal was empty, confirming the target he sought was not present in this area. Memories flooded back with images of the Asan family, and intelligence reports that his siblings had once appeared in this dark region. He recalled the feeling of helplessness as he continuously activated his detection skill, but couldn't feel any resonance from his family. Rune froze, realizing he might have to descend all the way to the 10th floor, but a sudden surge of aura startled him into extreme vigilance. Rune was startled when his blue earth tempering method skill emitted an extremely strong resonance signal, indicating his family was within scanning range. Rustling footsteps echoed in the silent night, making the atmosphere as tense as a drawn bowstring. Two dark figures appeared indistinctly. He quickly analyzed that the opponents were not ordinary knights or mages. The one following moved with extreme skill, fully equipped like a well-trained professional. He squinted, scrutinizing the opponent's peculiar identifying feature, having only one arm. Rune smirked, calculating whether to shed his disguise to acknowledge the familiar faces or continue to hide. Sina suddenly lunged and grabbed him tightly, teasing him about his current cute appearance, leaving him no time to react. He broke out in a cold sweat, stammering Sina's name in utter astonishment at being seen through so quickly. The female mage bowed respectfully, confirming his status as young master on the spot. Rune stared wide-eyed at the man accompanying her, and immediately recognized him as head butler Rune with a meaningful smile. Rune scoffed, asserting that without that distinctive aura, it would have taken much longer to recognize him in this guise. Sina explained that they had rushed here immediately upon seeing the traces he intentionally left behind. She added that the activation of the blue earth tempering method had helped them precisely locate the target in the dense forest. Rune recalled the old directive to create an anomalous signal in the dark region to announce his presence to his allies. Rune placed a hand on his chest, expressing his utmost honor at being entrusted with this important reception duty. A strange sound from the bushes interrupted the reunion, signaling the approach of a terrifying entity. A gigantic spirit tiger, glowing with blue energy, suddenly materialized behind them with an overwhelming aura. Rune froze. Cold sweat streamed down him as he saw the powerful woman emerge from behind the guardian beast. The woman smiled gently, softly expressing her joy at seeing him safe and sound after so many events. He bowed his head emotionally, softly uttering mother after so many long years of separation. Madame Sermon stared at the person opposite her. Her voice choked as she spoke of his extreme struggle for survival to protect his last remaining family member. A green energy barrier immediately unfurled, enveloping the entire forest area to block all prying eyes. Sena landed proudly after setting up the barrier, announcing that they could now chat freely without fear of being exposed. Kyle Daron glanced at Ryun's arm, then began to exaggerate his act about the fake injury to legitimize the story before the madam. He scratched his head with an awkward laugh, fabricating a story that he was injured due to his lack of skill and experience while escorting the young master's carriage. Truno Hilda adjusted his hat, explaining that he was living under the guise of being dead to the world, Thus, he had to hide meticulously in this secluded spot. Sena seized the opportunity to tease that Rune played the role of a useless person too well, leaving him speechless. While Kyle had a field day laughing at his master's helplessness, Madame Sermon placed her hand on her chest, praising the unwavering loyalty and absolute trust everyone held for the Sermon family. Rune blushed crimson, embarrassed like a young maiden as his mother warmly praised his ability to win people's hearts. She suddenly changed her expression to a serious one, asking directly if he was the mastermind behind this entire insane kidnapping play. She recalled the brutal assassination targeting the fingers of Patton, individuals once considered invulnerable but who had been annihilated. The image of Sons Patton hung upside down from a tree like a pathetic sacrificial offering vividly reappeared in her memory. Ryun's eyes turned sharp and cold, highly focused, and he did not evade his mother's decisive question. He smirked arrogantly and confidently, admitting that everything was within his calculated grasp. Madame Sermon's eyes widened completely, stunned and bewildered by her son's domineeringly frank admission. Truno Hilda and Kyle Daron, standing nearby, also broke out in a cold sweat, holding their breath in the tense atmosphere of the family confrontation. Sena observed through her falcon mask, her eyes clearly showing delight and excitement at this dramatic unveiling. Thanks to that kidnapping, the Sermon family forced the Patton faction to the negotiating table and made them cough up a huge amount of compensation. She recalled the scene where their enemies had to swallow their anger and humiliation as their beloved son was turned into a hostage. Madame Sermon looked deep into his eyes, asking a final question to confirm if the person standing before her was truly her son Ryun. Ryun looked directly into his mother's eyes, firmly asserting that even if his appearance or aura had changed, he was still the child she herself bore. Memories of Goddess Aldraiasi reappeared in his mind as a reminder of his origin and the heavy mission he was bearing. The air in the forest seemed to thicken as Ryun prepared to unleash a decisive psychological blow to crush everyone's doubts. He suddenly released energy, revealing a dense death aura that made Madame Sermon shiver in terror from the terrifying pressure. The dark purple aura surged into the shape of a ferocious beast's head, carrying the unmistakable characteristic breath of death of a necromancer. Ryun summoned a lantern-wielding skeleton to stand right behind him, openly revealing his identity as a necromancer before his parent without hesitation. With the keen instincts of a swordmaster and paladin, Madame Sermon immediately recognized the extreme danger emanating from her precious son. Ryun smirked confidently. He knew full well that half-hearted lies would never deceive a true paladin like her. He began to revisit the past, mentioning the kidnapping incident led by young Master Patton as an important milestone. The moment Patton grabbed his head was the signal shot to activate the entire brutal revenge plan he had meticulously arranged. Ryun declared bluntly that not only his mother, but also Truno, Hilda, Sena, and Zhang Dro were all indispensable pieces on his chessboard. Kyle Daron and Sena froze, their faces turning pale upon hearing that they were neatly within this monster's strategic calculations. He emphasized that they absolutely must understand his transformation to coordinate smoothly, avoiding ruining the grand scheme with foolish actions. Ryun placed his hand on his chest, his voice deepening as he began to recount the origin of everything, stemming from a fateful dream. Madame Sermon was astonished to hear him call it not just a dream, but a prophetic oracle about a dark future. In his memory, the family flag burned fiercely in a sea of flames, signaling the catastrophic destruction and complete downfall of the Sermon household. All three fell silent, feeling as if struck by lightning at the grim prospect Ryun had just painted. He described the living hell where Colin was brutally murdered, while the kingdom and other nobles turned their backs and abandoned their family to slowly wither away. Truno Hilda broke into a cold sweat, his old face crumpled as he realized that if the conflict truly escalated, that tragic outcome would be unavoidable. Sena also couldn't hide her extreme bewilderment. She had to admit that such a bloody scenario could absolutely become a cruel reality. In his dark memory, Ryun, his mother, and his sister Maria were captured and bound by the Patton family like livestock waiting to be slaughtered. Sena bled so much her mask shattered, while old General Alejandro became a pincushion riddled with arrows as he desperately tried to salvage the situation in vain. Ryun was dragged out by the plague-masked torturers to be a guinea pig for their twisted experiments for many years before dying in agony. He concluded that it was that very death which helped him awaken his true self, to know who he was and how overwhelming his power truly was. Ryun stood tall before his mother, ending his life story with a raw and cruel truth. A deadly green aura began to leak from him, his eyes sharp as razors as his anger was suppressed. Truno Hilda broke out in a cold sweat. He realized the boy's tale sounded as heavy as the last words of a veteran who had just crawled back from the realm of death. Sena shivered as she felt the terrifying fear and authenticity in every word her master uttered. He asserted that his current power was the only tool he had to shatter that wretched future. Madame Sermon fell silent, her eyes heavy with pain upon hearing her precious son had to endure an earthly hell. The surrounding space seemed to congeal with green killing intent and the question of whether everything was truly that bad. She bent down to his eye level, asking if that fated dream was the trigger for his recent series of crazy actions. Ryun's image overlapped with his past self as he growled, asserting the proud sermon blood flowing within him. A moment of silence enveloped them as she tried to digest the horrifying amount of information she had just received from her son. Kyle Daron and Truno admitted that if anyone else were boasting, they would have dismissed it as utter nonsense, but this was Ryun. Recalling Ryun crushing Patton's finger with one hand and defeating a dragon, Sena knew this was no joke, but an urgent warning. He could be the chosen one to receive a divine revelation, or simply someone who sees through the future to prevent the family's demise. She realized her son had secretly toiled in the shadows, accumulating terrifying power to overturn the board of fate. Lady Sermon regained her cold demeanor, propped her chin, and directly asked about the main issue, the next operational plan. When Ryun was surprised by her absolute trust, she unequivocally stated that in her eyes, he was no longer a child. Lady Sermon finalized her decision with the demeanor of a matriarch, asserting that this was a vital move for the family's future. Sena bowed her head, accepting the command with a very, well, though her eyes still held a hint of indescribable resignation. Truno curled his lips into a bitter smile, admitting that once the spear was cast, it had to be followed. There was no turning back now. Ryun psychologically pressured his mother with sharp, forceful words echoing through the forest, forcing her to confront the naked truth. Young Ryun pointed directly at the sky, making the insane demand to immediately discard their prestigious family name. Lady Sermon stared wide-eyed down at her precious son as if he had just grown a second head, unable to believe her ears. Both Sena and Truno gaped in utter shock at the audacity and recklessness of this demand. The old butler Truno frantically cried out, "Young master," fearing the family would become destitute commoners and lose all their power. Ryun calmly admitted he was well aware of the consequences, remaining stone-faced amidst his subordinates' frantic worry. He stood proudly among his subordinates, beginning to explain the true definition of the overwhelming power behind an empty title. Lady Sermon silently listened to her son's philosophy about the supreme power that could dominate nations. She began to grasp the true weight of power, the kind that could decide the fate of the world when disaster strikes. Though she understood, she was still stunned, asking again if her son was truly serious about erasing the family name. Ryun glared, forcefully declaring, "It must be done," allowing no further hesitation or negotiation. The vision of the Patton family launching an all-out war appeared, glowing crimson with blood, accompanied by the enemy's sinister smile. He clearly analyzed that the enemy saw Sermon's current weakness as a once-in-a-millennium opportunity to go all in. Truno sweated profusely, worried sick about the prospect of war breaking out while their side was at a disadvantage and lacked protection. The fatal question, "Can we win?" clearly appeared on the anxious faces of Kyle Daron and his companions. Ryun splashed cold water on everyone's faces, asserting that if they fought to the death now, it would be a total game over because no one would save them. He extended his hand, persuading his mother to execute a plan of retreating one step to advance three, using a feigned weakness strategy to ensnare the enemy in a death trap. Ryun looked directly into her eyes, his sharp, cold gaze reflecting his mother's image, warning her not to stall for time any longer. He raised a finger, emphasizing that there was still one more prerequisite condition that needed to be fulfilled immediately. To everyone's astonishment, Ryun demanded that she immediately bring his younger sister Maria back to the family right now. Truno and Sena gaped in shock, unable to understand why he would bring the young lady back at such a critical juncture, with the family in utter chaos. Ryun calmly explained that this move was truly good for Maria, and the only way to awaken her true desires. His mother lowered her face, pondering deeply over her son's sharp words and undeniable logic. She concluded with a decisive, "Very well," startling the servants behind her, who sweated profusely from shock. With the dignified demeanor of a family head, she declared she would abandon the family's hollow honor to welcome Maria back. Her eyes gleamed with belated regret, as she blamed herself for not having made this bold decision much earlier. Ryun smiled with satisfaction, praising his mother for a perfectly executed move that resonated deeply, precise to the millimeter. He added that this wise decision would help the entire family avoid meaningless sacrifices, preserving maximum strength. Unexpectedly, his mother drew the sword from her hip, her eyes filled with sorrow as she declared herself no longer worthy to lead the Sermon family. Ryun's face went blank, his smile vanished, Before he could understand what the old woman was up to, killing intent erupted fiercely. A sword strike that tore through the wind lunged forward, startling Rune, who narrowly dodged the blow with an expression of extreme shock. She charged into an unrelenting attack, calling out Rune's true name instead of his disguised identity, her eyes blazing with fighting spirit. Swinging her sword, she forcefully asserted that before being a paladin or a family head, she was still his biological mother. Her gaze was sharp as a razor, forcing him to bear the heavy responsibility of their family, which was on the brink. As the current family head, she declared she would personally test his capabilities to see if he was capable enough to carry the team. Rune realized she already knew that his father and brothers were as good as gone, and now he was the last hope. She poured all her strength into the sword, setting the condition that he must withstand this fatal blow to officially receive the transfer of power. Selene issued a stern ultimatum. If he could withstand one attack, she would follow all his arrangements. She declared that she would pledge her honor to guarantee convincing the elders and bearing all consequences. The familiar ding sound echoed as the system announced a hidden quest had just been activated. Rune broke out in a cold sweat, his pupils constricting as he realized the old woman wasn't joking but intended to follow through. Selene's killing intent erupted fiercely, forcing him to prepare himself for the deathly impact. Rune's gaze turned sharp and cold, focusing intensely on every slightest movement of his opponent. The quest board appeared with a name that sounded full of pressure. Selene's acknowledgement. Selena raised her sword high, and the surrounding space trembled as if it were about to collapse on him. Rune tried to refuse aloud. He did not want his mother to bear such a heavy responsibility. His hand began to accumulate his characteristic green mana, preparing for the worst-case scenario. Rune drew his twin daggers, lowering his center of gravity into a defensive stance, knowing there was no retreat. He gritted his teeth, determined to fight to the death, accepting this insane challenge to protect his family. A terrifying aura gathered behind Selene, forming a colossal green dragon avatar. This was the prestige of the Silver Dragon, his mother's moniker that commanded respect from the entire world. She was a true monster, possessing both professions, swordmaster and paladin. However, Rune quickly spotted a fatal weakness. She could not use both powers simultaneously. If the sword glowed with magic, it was a mana-enhanced physical attack of a swordmaster. But if her body radiated a golden aura, it was the divine power of a paladin. Rune strained his eyes to observe, his mind racing continuously to devise the precise countermeasure. Selene swung her sword, and a slash imbued with divine power tore through space, streaking directly towards his head. Selene's eyes widened in astonishment as she realized she could neither block nor dodge the bizarre counterattack. She exclaimed in bewilderment upon seeing a strange blue energy current blocking her overwhelming sword strike. Rune smirked and explained that he dodged because her attack was purely mana, not divine power. He had activated his spirit form skill, borrowing the power of ghosts to neutralize the deadly blow. Fresh blood splattered from Rune's chest. This frail body still couldn't withstand the skill's immense burden. Selene screamed in alarm when she saw her son was hit, while Rune secretly cursed the imperfect body. She rushed to support his blood-soaked body, to the shock of Trunehilda and Kyle Daron. Rune still put on a show with a forced smile, mentioning the goddess Aldrassi to calm the panicked old woman. He clutched his chest and declared this scar was proof of his mother's love, affirming his identity as her son. Tears welled up in Selene's eyes. She was completely manipulated by this devilish son in a spectacular fashion. The system announced Rune had received Selena's acknowledgement, while the two old men behind them sighed in relief. Sena cried profusely out of worry, while the system dinged and reported he had dodged the Swordmaster's attack and gained experience. The spirit form skill immediately leveled up after that reckless stunt. Rune sat down on the ground for his mother to heal him, and the experience bar for the phantom profession jumped to a new level. He gazed into the distance, telling himself there were still important matters he had to resolve by himself. Rune handed Trunehilda a letter detailing the timing of his renunciation of the family's noble title. He carefully instructed the old butler about the plans that needed to be executed immediately after his departure. Selene held the envelope with a regretful expression, wishing she could stand by her son on this arduous path. Sena anxiously reported that Colin and Alejandro were restless due to the young master's condition. Rune decided to keep it from Alejandro because that old man was too emotional, but he would personally go to meet Colin to reassure her. Kyle Daron chuckled and affirmed that old man Alejandro wouldn't mind being left out. The entire team, consisting of Sena, Trunehilda, Selene, and Kyle Daron, stood watching the departing figure with lingering affection. Rune, in his disguise, turned back to wave goodbye to his subordinates and family, one last time. He walked alone on the path, leaving behind the family's glory to venture into the dust and grime. The map displayed that the next location was the bustling area of the Daeron Kingdom. He sought out a wooden house with a sign that read, Marton Information Branch, to receive quests for leveling up. Sapphire warmly welcomed him, calling him by the title, Level 5 Assassin Lord Leon. Rune coldly reached out to take the quest scroll from the alluring female manager. His eyes sharpened with a deadly gaze as he held the target's execution information in his hand. The atmosphere in the tavern grew noisy when the commoners saw a completely cloaked stranger enter. Sapphire smirked, announcing that this was his promotion test to rank 4. The system immediately displayed a quest activation notification as soon as he unrolled the scroll. The quest board clearly showed the requirement to assassinate the mage Goma in the Kaled territory of the Daeron Kingdom. Rune frowned, searching his memories, as the name of the mage Goma sounded quite familiar within the underworld. He assessed this as a suitable target to test his current combat stats. According to intelligence reports, this Goma had appeared and personally created a dungeon right in Kaled. Numerous greedy mercenaries and adventurers had met tragic deaths, their bodies piling up under his hand. The desperate villagers had no choice but to pool their money to hire the Martin Assassin Guild to clean up the mess. Rune didn't ponder much, immediately finalizing the plan to clear the dungeon and eliminate Goma. As soon as he set foot in the desolate, windswept village of Kaled, an old woman warned him to leave immediately. The moment Rune arrived, the old woman blocked his path with an extremely stern attitude, asking why he had ventured into this place. She trembled, warning that a thick mist of death was engulfing this remote, desolate village. Rune paused, his eyes turning sharp and cold upon hearing that all the men and boys in the village were vanishing without a trace. He focused on analyzing the most crucial keyword in the story, that only males were being targeted. The old woman squinted her remaining eye suspiciously, questioning if he was an ignorant outsider from another place. Her wrinkled face showed extreme fear, as if death itself held a knife to her throat when she spoke of forbidden things. The old woman firmly asserted that death was lurking everywhere, and no man was safe here. Rune listened silently from within his hood, his tactical mind beginning to piece together the scattered facts to assess the danger level. The old woman pointed towards the distant mountain, where the mage resided, spreading terror throughout the village. She tremblingly revealed that the mad mage was devouring men like fast food to increase his magical power. The old woman screamed for Rune to leave immediately if he didn't want to die in vain, but he remained calmly standing. A young girl suddenly rushed over, interrupting the conversation, frantically calling her mother and trying to pull the old woman away from Rune. She whispered softly to reassure the old woman, but her eyes furtively observed the stranger's reaction. The girl forced a smile, explaining that her mother had lost her son and was mentally unstable, telling him not to mind her delirious words. Immediately, she changed her tone, eagerly asking if he was a traveler with a falsely innocent expression. The girl enthusiastically pointed the way to the inn, inviting him to stay, rest, and eat, with an overly welcoming attitude. Ryun's sharp eyes glinted with suspicion as he noticed the rapid shift in attitude between the two women. He realized this young woman was deliberately trying to keep him here as bait, completely contradicting the old woman's warning. Sapphire, in her intelligence report, had warned that there were rumors of villagers sacrificing mercenaries to the mages. Rune decided not to hunt the boss immediately, but would visit the inn as invited to verify information and meet a few necessary people. Two mysterious witches stood on a rooftop, bathing in the cold moonlight, exuding a strong killing intent as they observed the village below. The dilapidated inn lay silently under the night sky, peaceful on the outside, but reeking of deadly traps within. The village girl began to prattle on, explaining about the old woman from earlier, calling her Mrs. Sarmon with a sickeningly fake tone. She fabricated a tragic story about a poor old woman who had lost both her sons, aiming to divert his suspicion. She firmly asserted that the disappearance of men in the village was 100% true, not just idle rumors. No one was spared. From travelers to mercenaries who ventured here, all met the same fate of vanishing without a trace. Rune inquired about the Lord, and she clicked her tongue, saying that the soldiers who came to investigate returned empty-handed, achieving nothing. The girl even feigned kindness, leaning in to remind Rune to be careful of his own insignificant life if he stayed in this place. Still unconvinced, he pressed, asking if the old lord intended to idly watch his people disappear without taking stronger action. The young woman began to act dramatically, tears welling up, as she recounted how the villagers had to pool money to hire a fixer at an exorbitant price. Rune raised an eyebrow upon hearing the term fixer, his gamer's brain beginning to search for data on this specialized terminology. That title pointed directly to the Martin Assassin Guild, affiliated with the renowned Asan family, a place specializing in tough assignments. It turned out these common villagers were the wealthy clients paying to hire assassins, not that useless old lord. She advised him to leave soon, while Rune nodded dismissively, his face showing boredom as if he had seen through everything. Click. The dry sound of a door opening interrupted the village girl's clumsy act, causing the atmosphere to drop. Rune glanced back, his razor-sharp gaze sweeping over the newcomer to assess their danger level. A group of mercenaries entered in a textbook formation, complete with a tank and a mage. He was slightly surprised to see a low-tier mercenary squad accompanied by a rare mage in their lineup. The leader, Byack, banged on the table demanding food, grumbling complaints about this remote, desolate village making them travel so far. He turned to confirm with his comrades about meeting the client at this rundown inn, his attitude extremely arrogant and condescending. Rune glanced at the silver emblem on his opponent's chest, silently assessing that this group possessed some practical combat skill and wasn't just a bunch of nobodies. The rotten wooden door let out a piercing groan, signaling a new arrival at the dilapidated inn. Rhythmic footsteps echoed on the wooden floor, indicating the newcomer possessed a very confident and decisive demeanor. A fully cloaked girl entered, exuding a mysterious aura that made others observe her warily. The leader, Byack, turned to ask Rune in an arrogant tone if he was the client they were waiting for. Rune coldly denied it immediately with a brief reply, not even sparing the man a glance. The strange girl swept past the mercenaries, both sides exchanging probing gazes filled with tension, but no one made a move. Ignoring the soldiers, she went straight towards Rune's table, as if she had identified her target beforehand. She casually asked if it was all right to share the table, her face completely nonchalant. Rune frowned in annoyance, snapping that he had never invited her to sit down. She ignored his rude attitude, took off her hood, and introduced herself as Ravina with a confident smile. A close-up of Ravina's beautiful face, with her pink hair and mischievous freckles, was revealed under the light. Ravina leaned in and whispered the alias Leon to confirm if she had found the right person. Rune recalled Sapphire's message about sending an assistant, but this one seemed a bit off. He was utterly speechless when he realized Sapphire had sent a guide instead of a proper assassin to help clear the dungeon. Rune was startled when this girl blurted out his alias in broad daylight, not knowing how to keep her mouth shut. Ravina innocently beamed, expressing her utmost honor at meeting the famous figure of the Marton branch. Unable to take it anymore, Rune lunged forward and clamped her mouth shut before she could spill all the organization's secrets for the entire inn to hear. He signaled for silence with a murderous expression, warning her to shut up immediately if she wanted to live. The mercenaries at the next table started looking over due to the suspicious commotion coming from this strange pair. The inn's wooden door cast a warm yellow light, where daredevils gathered, awaiting a chance to change their lives. Byack grimaced and turned to complain to the female mage beside him that this VIP client was too late for their appointment. The mercenary leader clasped his hands together, grumbling resentfully about having missed out on a lucrative troll hunt to be stuck here. He declared this a golden opportunity for the Steel Shield mercenary band to burnish their reputation through this first dungeon expedition. Rune glanced with disdain while Ravina winked meaningfully, both completely ignoring the blabbering mercenaries at the next table. Byack clicked his tongue, assessing the two strangers as mere rookies who didn't know their place. Ravina whispered with a dangerous expression that these people had no idea how terrifying that dungeon truly was. Outside the inn, the silent night enveloped the village under the cold moonlight, signaling something ominous. She flashed a calculating smile, her eyes sharp as she thought of the fate of those who dared to underestimate the dungeon's danger. Heavy footsteps echoed, breaking the tense atmosphere in the inn. An old woman leaning on a cane entered with a haggard expression, introducing herself as Sarmon, the one who had made the commission. Rune was startled, his eyes wide open as he immediately recognized her as the peculiar old woman he had met at the village gate the day before. The old woman slammed a large bag of money onto the table. The enchanting clinking of gold coins made everyone hold their breath. Both the mercenaries and Ravina stared wide-eyed at the glittering gold spilling out from the torn cloth bag, greed surging within them. With teary eyes, the old woman begged them to defeat the mage on the mountain and bring back her son's body. Her voice choked with tears. She only wished to bury her unfortunate son in a warm, sunny place to fulfill her duty as a mother. Byack picked up a gold coin and scrutinized it with an undisguised greedy smile, while Ravina observed from behind with surprise. The leader cleared his throat, regaining a fake serious demeanor, then took the old woman's hand to express deep sympathy. He puffed out his chest proudly, asserting that the word failure was never in the dictionary of the renowned Steel Shield band. Byack concluded with a firm promise to complete this mission perfectly, to claim all the gold. Byack stroked his beard dramatically, complaining that the price was too paltry compared to his comrades' lives, trying to extort more money. Ravina smirked meaningfully, seeing the captain start haggling with the poor old woman. He toyed with the ring in his hand with a feigned, reluctant expression, as if he was doing a favor by accepting. The old woman was startled when the greedy man demanded to seize the family heirloom ring, intended for his daughter-in-law, in exchange for bringing back her son's body. Rune glared at the outrageous scene, killing intent beginning to leak through his cloak, annoyed by the mercenaries. The system suddenly chimed. The Veda's legacy quest updated along with the hero soul location map. Ravina broke out in a cold sweat, turning to ask when she saw her new teammate suddenly freeze as if possessed. Ryun's face flushed, his sharp eyes focused intently on the system notification that had just appeared before him. Bayak's eyes widened, sweat pouring down him like rain, as he realized the terrifying energy emanating from the ring in his hand. He slammed the table with a bang, feigning anger and disparaging the cheap ring to hide his extreme delight, and quickly seal the deal. The leader sprang to his feet, immediately ordering the advance, leaving his bewildered subordinates wondering why their boss had changed his mind so suddenly. Bayak scrutinized the ring under the light, grinning sinisterly at the unimaginable bargain he had stumbled upon in this godforsaken place. Ravina narrowed her eyes suspiciously, seeing the captain's complete change in attitude and sensing something amiss. The night wind blew fiercely atop the desolate rocky peak, where the group's target lay hidden, awaiting those who would offer themselves to death. The entire team moved through the night, and Bayak eagerly asked for the appraisal results of the hot item they had just extorted from the old woman. The red-haired mage cast a magic circle, confirming that this was definitely a genuine item imbued with magic, not some common market trinket. She grimaced, admitting her own meager skill level couldn't discern the specific stats because the item's grade was too high. The ring emitted a brilliant purple aura, promising to be a high-grade piece of equipment worth risking their lives for. Bayak turned to his companions, smugly declaring this deal was too good compared to merely having to kill some mediocre mage in the countryside. He clutched the treasure tightly in his hand, laughing triumphantly under the moonlight, unaware that he held a ticking time bomb leading to death. The red-haired mage picked up the ring to examine it, affirming that there were certainly many other valuable items in this dungeon because its owner possessed such genuine artifacts. Bayak clenched his fist, filled with greed, his eyes gleaming brightly as he ordered the entire team to strike swiftly and decisively to seize everything. While the mercenaries aggressively advanced into the forest, Rune hid behind a tree, observing with a calculating smirk. He secretly underestimated his opponent's excessive confidence, believing that even the most skilled individuals were useless without information. Rushing into a dungeon without thorough reconnaissance was akin to signing the entire team's death warrant. Ravina suddenly appeared right in front of Rune, teasing that his face clearly showed his lack of basic knowledge. She chuckled mischievously, saying she couldn't sit still, so she had followed to watch the show, even though she knew he intended to go solo. Ravina waved her hand dismissively, believing that in this remote, rural dungeon, no matter how useless the others were, it wouldn't be an issue. Rune coldly warned her not to be overconfident, reminding her about the magical item they had just stolen from the old woman. He explained his reason for tailing them was that the variable introduced by that item could change the entire situation, making everything unpredictable. Ravina rested her chin in her hand, looking at him with interest, realizing that this assistant was not a novice as he appeared, but a true professional. Seeing Rune continue to move, she wondered why he had to complicate things so much instead of resolving them quickly. She made a provocative throat-slitting gesture and stuck out her tongue, proposing to simply kill everyone and steal their loot for a quick resolution. Ryun's gaze sharpened. He showed his displeasure and contempt for such a crude, thieving mentality. He turned his back and walked away, asserting that assassins were of a completely different caliber than mere bandits who only knew to extort items by any means necessary. Ravina stood dumbfounded, reaching out as if to stop him, completely surprised by her new teammate's principled professional philosophy. The dungeon gate appeared in the middle of the night forest, emitting an enchanting blue magical light along with eerie, echoing sounds. The entire group stood before the brightly lit entrance, preparing to step into the tiger's den, unaware that death was lurking right behind them. A terrifying surge of power suddenly tore through space, shattering the dungeon's protective barrier in an instant. Rune stepped through the recently torn energy mist, coldly confirming that this was indeed the dungeon, while Ravina followed closely behind with an excited expression.